meeting of the Performance, Assets and Strategy Scrutiny Committee will start at 5:30 p.m.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Katie Porrer, and I'm Chair of the Performance, Assets and Strategy Scrutiny Committee at Cambridge City Council. And welcome to everybody online, officers and members of the public who may be watching on the YouTube link, and to officers and members who are here today. Just to start off, I will note that we've had one apology for absence from Councillor Hugh Clough, who is being replaced by Councillor Naomi Bennett, who's their alternative member. And I think, if possible, I'd just like to go round the room and introduce who we are, because obviously this is a brand new committee. It's the first meeting of an Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the City Council since we changed the cabinet model last month. So I think it would be helpful for people to know who we all are. So as I said, I'm Councillor Katie Porrer, and I represent Market Ward.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gawthorpe-Wood, so I represent King's Hedges, and I'm Vice Chair of this committee, and I'm a Labour councillor for King's Hedges.
I'm Councillor Dave Bajan. I'm currently a Labour Party member for Romsey.
Patrick Shield, Arbury Labour.
Jamie DL, West Chesterton.
Tim Griffin, Coleridge.
Good evening, I'm Jodie Everington. I'm the Council's Chief Finance Officer.
Hello, I'm Jane Wilson. I'm the Council's Chief Operating Officer.
Mike Davey, Labour, Petersfield.
Councillor Naomi Bennett, Abbey Ward, as alternate for Councillor Hugh Clough, Newham Ward, and I'm not stating my party affiliation because this is supposedly an apolitical committee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Matthew Stickley. I'm an interim committee manager here at the Council, and I'm supporting the two scrutiny committees after they've started.
I'm Dan Kelly. I'm the Democratic Services Manager and helping streaming the meeting this evening.
And thank you very much. We are joined by, I'm just having a look, I think James Elms. James, if you're there, fantastic. Do you want to just introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm James Elms. I'm Director City Services.
Thank you very much, James. We're also joined by some other councillors, cabinet members and members of varying groups who you might see online. I'm not proposing necessarily to introduce all of them, but hopefully you can see them. And if they speak, obviously, if you could let us know who you are and which position you're holding, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest from any members attending tonight? Councillor Bajan.
Yeah, I'm a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you very much. Apologies, Councillor Bennett.
I understand that we are supposed to declare whether we're members of a party group and are under a political whip. I am a member of the Green Group, but we are an unwhipped group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. I'm about to talk about that in my next part of the speech, but I'll come to that in a minute. We have a selection of minutes in front of us today. Because of the change, these are minutes from previous committees that obviously would have in effect reported to us and or potentially the other Overview and Scrutiny Committee. All the chairs of these previous committees have been consulted and they're happy with these minutes. So unless members dissent, I'm proposing to sign them tonight, but we do then have to wait for the other Scrutiny Committee in, I think, 2 weeks to sign off their part, because particularly I think some of the housing portfolio and others are split across these two new Scrutiny Committees. So can I just check that members are happy for me to sign this on behalf of this committee, pending approval from Councillor Young's committee in a couple of weeks? Thank you. That's agreed. Fantastic. I'll sort that out with Democratic Services later. Next up on the agenda is public questions. We don't have any public questions, so I think we can move on from that. But I would note, obviously, in future, public questions should be about what we're scrutinising, whereas, obviously, if they're about a particular issue, it's probably better directed to Cabinet, but we'll obviously work with anyone who puts in a question to help them know where best to put it. So we now move on to the first item on the agenda, a substantial one, which is the role of overview and scrutiny in local government. These are papers prepared by various organisations, which I hope you've all had time to look at. We've also had some very useful videos being shared by our transformation team, just talking a little bit about the change between the previous committee structure, probably quite a combative structure. And this move to a cabinet, which will meet, so in effect the executive councils as was, who will meet very regular, basically on a monthly basis. And then these scrutiny committees, where our remit is to take kind of a more, probably a strategic overview. We have the option of pre-scrutinising stuff before it goes to cabinet, and we have the option of scrutinising post-decision. So, for example, that might be following through a decision to see if that worked or didn't work and how we can learn. It is the first meeting today. It's been quite a tight timescale, as I'm sure you appreciate. We've literally only approved this at council in May. So some of the constituent parts of the scrutiny system, such as the workload plan, which normally takes 3 or 4 months to bring together, is coming together today. So I took the decision to run this meeting with updates from our key officers, and so that we can work together and with officers to set what we want to see for, in effect, our work plan for the next year. So that the next agendas will be quite different, because we'll be doing much deeper dives in particular areas. We may be inviting cabinet members to sort of explain decisions or what they're planning to do. So I hope that's acceptable to everybody, but it seemed the most sensible way forward so that we can get this committee up and running as soon as possible. You'll notice there are some areas that are not on the agenda tonight, the local plan and Hartree and things like that. That is because we're waiting on various decisions later in this month, some relating to the spending review, and we will obviously, Councillor Gawthrope-Wood and myself will be keeping an eye on that over the summer before our next meeting in September. And if anything comes up of an urgent nature, obviously we will let committee members know. As Councillor Bennett mentioned already, the proposal for overview and scrutiny is we are not whipped, so that means that political parties don't take a view before the meeting on how people are going to vote. I hope we can move forward by consensus in the most part, and our job is to scrutinise what the council are doing so that our residents get the best possible experience. And I hope working collaboratively with cabinet members, I have to say, who have already been very forthcoming, as has the new leader, Councillor Holloway, who's here tonight as well, in terms of working together to make sure that we can scrutinise things that we need to as we bring this new system together. Does anyone have... Oh, before I say that, obviously, the one thing we're missing at the moment is the housing board. That hasn't been fully set up. That is not a scrutiny committee. Officers are very clear that is not where decisions are taken. So the chair, myself and the vice chair, Councillor Gawthrope, would have asked for those terms of reference to be shown to us, because I think it's really important that the housing board with the tenant reps has a way of feeding into this committee, so that we don't end up having a sort of separate part that doesn't feed into us. So we will be updating on that as soon as we can. We can obviously set up task and finish groups, which I think we'll cover on the last item on the agenda. And I hope that the new way of working, so we're sitting not in party groups, we're mixed in with speakers and officers tonight, and we're sitting in a kind of round table format, which I hope will be constructive for how we move forward. Does anyone have any questions on the paperwork in item 5 that Matt very kindly put together for us? No, thank you very much. I'll take that as a good sign. And obviously we have Matt, our Democratic Services scrutiny expert, as well as Dan and Democratic Services, who are on hand to help. And if there are any queries, please do approach Councillor Gawthrope-Wood and myself, as we're very happy to assist you. So now we're moving on to the next item, item 6, which is the update on the budget setting timetable. And this will be a verbal report from Jodie Etherington, who's our Chief Financial Officer. So I'm going to hand over to Jodie. And I have asked officers for all of these updates, I should say, as well as talking about what's happening now, to give us a kind of overview of the next 12 months so we can kind of work out when we need to put things on our scrutiny agenda, obviously the budget being the most obvious one in Jodie's case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, so you've asked me to give you an early update on budget setting process for 26-27. Obviously, we are fairly early in the year at the moment. So, as you'll be aware, the BSR for 25-26 has set out provisional savings targets for the next 5 years. We would always look to refresh those and review those as more information becomes available. Committee members will no doubt be aware that we're expecting the spending review from government tomorrow. And hopefully with that, or very shortly afterwards, we may get a bit more clarity on the future funding position for the council and how local government funds will be distributed in the future, and also a bit more detail on the government's approach to the business rates reset. So once we've got all of that information, we'll be looking to undertake over the next couple of weeks a light touch review of the medium-term financial strategy and the savings targets for the next 5 years, taking into account the outcomes from the spending review, latest economic forecasts from the Bank of England, and any other significant changes that we're aware of. So, for example, we are shortly expecting updated pension contribution rates for our actuary, so we'll factor in some of those big ticket items. We will come up with some revised savings targets over the medium term, with the intention of bringing a paper to Cabinet in July, setting out both the high-level savings targets, also the approach to budget setting and what the overall timetable will look like. That paper will also set out the approach to public consultation on the budget, which would normally happen over the autumn. And then we will be looking for final budget proposals to come back to this committee in January, prior to going on to Cabinet and then full council for approval on the 26th of February. So that's the budget setting timetable for 26-27. In terms of other areas of work that this committee may be interested in over the coming months, clearly we have in the 25-26 budget, the council has agreed quite an ambitious programme of savings, and it's really vitally important at the moment that we're able to monitor the council's performance against those savings. So we will be looking to bring quarterly financial monitoring reports through to Cabinet. The first of those in relation to Q1 will come to Cabinet in September. Really just because of obviously the gap over the summer holidays, there isn't a Cabinet meeting in August, so it unfortunately slips to September. But I would expect the report to be ready in draft roughly sort of end of July. And so that will kind of be the first opportunity really to have a look and see how we're performing earlier in the year on those against those savings. And then from Q2 onwards, we're hoping that the financial monitoring information will be incorporated into the wider performance management reports, which I think Jane will be speaking about later on the agenda. So that's a brief outline. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jodie. That's great. Does anyone have any questions? Obviously, we have got an item on the forward plan later, but if you have any questions for Jodie now, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have some very basic and simple questions. The first one is that in previous years, we've run a separate budget for the housing revenue account and the general account. And although legally those have to remain separate, I understood your proposal was to synchronise them. Is that still something that you're aiming to do in 26-27?
Thank you. Yes, so you're absolutely right. The HRA is a ring-fenced account. So in terms of the resource in the HRA, we do need to keep that very separate. But in terms of the process, in terms of both building the budgets and the scrutiny of those budgets, I'm looking for that to be much more aligned this year and for combined reports to be brought forward.
That sounds great, and I think we all appreciate how difficult that is considering your resource constraints. It's not a small thing. The other issue was alignment of the MTFS and budget. I know that some of us are very keen on this idea and some of us were less keen. It seems quite a big ask to be asking for that to also be coming through for alignment when we're asking you to align the HRA and the general account. So I just wondered what the timetable was for that.
Absolutely. So the BSR that was approved back in February for 25-26 included as an attachment to that the medium-term position. So we didn't call that a medium-term financial statement, but it was essentially the key components were all there in terms of that medium-term look, what's happening with income and expenditure and reserves over the next 10 years. So that's our kind of baseline position. One of the problems with the previous approach of bringing the MTFS in the autumn was it was kind of, it kind of fell in the middle. It was too late really to influence some of the budget setting thinking, but yet it wasn't then aligned with what the final budget assumptions were in February. So by slightly restructuring this, the idea is, as I say, we do almost a light touch review. So when we do the July paper, we're not going to be doing the full exercise of going out to every service and asking for budget bids, etc., to feed into an MTFS. It's going to be much more high level. It's going to be taking the February PSR as a starting point, adjusting for significant items, excuse me, and then, you know, using that as our baseline for setting expectations and targets for budget setting 26-27. And then the full refresh of the MTFS will take place alongside the budget setting over the autumn and coming to full council in February. It actually makes more sense for us to do that as a finance team, because we're then revising all of the assumptions and doing everything in one go, rather than doing a 5-year view and then 6 months later doing a 1 year. We were kind of always out of sync, but actually we can take it all in the round.
Oh, thank you very much, Jodie.
That seems entirely satisfactory.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Davey, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My question, I'm really pleased to hear that you'll be bringing the performance reports alongside, and it's just about the reality of how that's going to be done, because clearly if there are savings, well, there will be savings being made over the course of next year, it'd be useful to see how that impacts or not on performance. And it's just about how feasible, I suppose, is, and how will they be linked, I suppose, Jodie. It may be one for Jane, but it would be helpful, I think, to have the two alongside one another.
Thank you very much. Did you want to respond to that, or are you happy with? Okay, Jane will pick that up. Has anyone else got any more questions? I suspect after we've heard from Jane, we may have some more questions for both of you together, if that's okay. Councillor Dale.
Try that one. Very specific question, actually. What's the timings, what's the expected deadline for actually delivering this report for Cabinet? Because it'd be probably good for some of us to have a chance to review it before it gets there. I need to plan my own calendar.
Yeah, thank you. So I believe the Cabinet meeting on the 15th of July. So the publication for that will be on the 7th at the very latest. Dan's nodding. It's probably going to tell me it's a couple of days earlier than that, but certainly first week of July, I'd expect that to be available. And, you know, happy to share with this committee. It's right that Cabinet see it first, but obviously happy to share with this committee once that's been through Cabinet.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions at the moment? No, I can't see anyone. In that case, we will move on to our next item, 7, which is update on the changes to performance management, which Jane is presenting. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Councillor Porra. So I'm hoping that this item is a sort of a mix of a bit of post-scrutiny and information coming through to support your wider decision-making in your discussion later. So you may remember that a paper came to the old Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Committee for one of the sets of minutes that you recently approved on a new approach to performance management. And so I'm coming to give an update on where we are with that. I'm also going to take the opportunity to talk a little bit more widely about performance reporting, including the customer feedback report that will be going to Cabinet in July. It's not ready yet, obviously isn't coming for pre-scrutiny, and I want to talk through what the options are there for you. And I will just do a very quick whistle-stop of other things that the Corporate Hub will be working on over this year, and I mean genuinely whistle-stop. More than happy to come back on any of those items to a future meeting. Okay, so I'm not going to talk through the paper from the 31st of March in any great detail. There was a lot of discussion at the time, which was very helpful, and the meetings, the minutes of those meetings, I said, are available, and you've just approved them. But following that meeting, we've moved on to practical delivery, and if you remember, what we were talking about was both how the organisation as a whole carries out performance management and then how we report on it. And the key first step, the piece of work that we've been working on quite solidly since the approval, was developing and checking our performance measures. So this is quite a significant piece of work. It's been looking at trying to bring them together in one place, really from across the whole council, and work's been taking place with each group in turn, both to capture what they're already doing and also to ask and look at whether they are the best measures for now to assess our performance against both statutory responsibilities and the aspirations of the council. So there's a lot of officers working right across the council and asking, why is this the measure that I have? Sometimes that's because it's the absolutely right one. Some occasions, I'll be very honest, it's because it's what we've been collecting for quite a long time, and there might be better and more efficient ways to do it. So, and this is happening at the same time as the implementation of the staff restructure across the council. And as part of that wider change, it's really important to ask staff what are they measuring and why, because people are moving roles. And it's essential to have the appropriate measures in place so that the changes that we set out to achieve around purpose and the staff changes to do that actually stick. That process of developing the measures is being supported with training, workshops and one-to-one sessions with managers and directors so that everybody is sighted on what's going on and can feed into that process. I'm not going to say it isn't a challenge. A lot of people are still, embedding into their new roles, but for me that makes it even more important to do that work now, because that's when they're thinking about what it is that they do and why they're doing it, and gets us to the right place. So Communities Group have been working on this for quite some time. Corporate Hub are also well underway with the process, and we're moving on to City Services and Economy in Place next. So that's the development of the measures. And alongside that process, we're developing the data reporting, and this is using a dashboard approach. And as it was set out in the paper, and as Jodie mentioned earlier, the aim is to develop an integrated approach, bringing that performance data alongside financial and risk data to give a contextualised picture in the round. So we've already got financial data and risk data sitting in two systems, T1 and 4 risk, if you want to know what they're called, and I don't know why all of our systems have got numbers. But the good news is that we've had confirmation that we can pull all of that into one kind of platform. We put the performance data in alongside that, and what that means is that then it becomes much easier to put it all together into a dashboard approach. The initial focus and the work that's already been happening is alongside that, checking the performance measures themselves, is working on the development of operational dashboards, and these are the dashboards for officers. So, and we are well along that journey at the moment. The next step is to develop the templates for reporting to members, and in particular Cabinet and members of scrutiny committees. And the plan is, and this is something I'm more than happy to have your feedback on tonight, is to run workshops with you in September. So these would not be in a formal committee setting, but it's asking for your time to come and work with the project officers who will have developed some options and possible ways to present information, so that we can work with you to make sure that when we do bring it through, it's information that is going to help you. It will be more strategic than the information that the operational leads need, but we want to make sure it's the right stuff that you're going to get. And our intention, and I think again as Jodie said, is that Q1 we won't have that already, so the Q1 finance data will just come as finance data. The intention is to have this coming to you as an integrated report from Q2 onwards. So there'll be strategic risks, key performance indicators, and financial information for the council as a whole. And I think our aspiration is to look at by group as well, so that you've got really solid information across the council as a whole. And essentially, the goal is to provide meaningful, robust and easy to find data on a quarterly basis on the performance of the council. So that's in broad brush where we are with the performance management framework and building it out to bring it through. I'd like to comment on the forthcoming customer feedback report, because I think it's really important to explore the difference now between old scrutiny committees and how that worked, and the fact what the system that we're in now. So this will go to Cabinet in July. It's a factual report, and it will provide data on the 24-25 year, both in terms of our own customer feedback and the report of the local government ombudsman. So that's not the housing one, it's the broader local government ombudsman. Now, historically, this report came via the scrutiny committee, because that was the place that we could get it into the public domain, if you like. It was the place, the only place. But it will now be coming through to Cabinet. These reports don't tend to have this, and the performance report don't tend to have associated decisions, because they're much more about factual information, reporting on practical information that we collect and share back with you. So they're going to be going to Cabinet, which will provide that public visibility and enable the Cabinet their ability to monitor progress against strategic objectives. And the key point I'd like to make here is the opportunity for both you and your partner Scrutiny Committee to use this information in a slightly different way, because it will provide you the context that would enable you to see what services within your area are performing well or not. Now, I might well be the person bringing that report to Cabinet. I'm probably not the person that you want to do a deep dive on if there's a particular service that isn't working, but it might well inform your thinking about what you want to have come to this committee in using your kind of wider remit and approach. So it's just an opportunity to think about how you use those information reports to support you. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to work with you and have our corporate hub teams work with you on that basis. So that was it. I don't know if you want to stop for questions and then do the whistle stop tour of the rest of corporate hub, or up to you.
I think probably as that element fits very well with Jodie's, we might just have a brief pause, because I think what I'm looking at as chair is how we structure the next year. So obviously we've got an initial budget report coming for probably which could hit our scrutiny in September. But then after that, I'm guessing December time, I'll look at James if she knows. When are we going to have the...
We're aiming for late autumn, I think, is where
we have a committee in November and December. So my feeling is potentially, whilst obviously we can all look out, I think particularly customer feedback that is coming to Cabinet soon, we as members of this committee need to be looking at that, because it is too late to pre-scrutinise it, but we could call it in for post-scrutiny if we wanted. Or, we can ask for post-scrutiny. Calling is a different process, I keep being reminded, whereas on planning committee it's very much the other way around, so I'm going to get my terminology right. So if we wanted to post-scrutinise it, we could, but equally, or we could put it on the schedule for November potentially, where we would get Jodie and Jane's reports together. I'm assuming it'll be perhaps in some kind of traffic light form. I really find those reports quite helpful, where we've had them, I think, in building control, and we've seen them in some other areas where obviously the annual monitoring report, for example, will come through to planning with red, amber, green, which I have to say makes it a lot more accessible in terms of quickly finding out where the problems are. But I would welcome members' views on the timescale for that. Would we be comfortable with waiting till November to see it all, or I'm in your hands on this? Councillor Davey.
You want comments on what else Jane said first or not?
Can we just look at the times? Well, if you think it's relevant, go for it.
November.
Okay, so Councillor Davis suggesting November. Is that good for everybody? Obviously, we can still check the reports coming to Cabinet. There's nothing to stop us if there's an issue raising it informally. But I think...
Sorry, I should explain. If we have it any later, it will be too late to affect the planning for next year and the review of last year. So if it veers off to before Christmas, it would be after Christmas. It would be problematic, I think.
Okay, so Matt's going to put a marker down that we're going to put that on the forward plan potentially for later. That's really helpful. And as I say, please do remember to check the Cabinet agendas every month, as I'm sure you will, because there will be things on there that the Chair and Vice Chair and I haven't been able to get on this agenda because we haven't seen the data yet because it's being written at the moment. But I think in future years, we'll hopefully get a bit of a longer lead time for a lot of these things, so they will be coming through a bit more quickly. The public consultation that Jodie mentioned, obviously the budget goes for some kind of public consultation. Do scrutiny members want to have any input into that? In timescale wise, would September be too late for that, Jodie? I mean, obviously it's got to go to Cabinet and the exec, but obviously one of the roles of pre-scrutiny is that we can throw out some ideas for Jodie and obviously the ruling group. I see Councillor Smith here, who's our resources Cabinet member. do members wish to scrutinise that formally in a committee? Do people wish to just have their input now or later? What's the time frame for that, Jodie?
I think what I would be looking would be for Cabinet to give their approval to the high-level approach in July. And then clearly there'll be, once the high-level approach has been agreed, there will then need to be a piece of work to look at the detail of exactly what we're consulting on, which will take a bit more time to work up. So I think there's possibly an opportunity for the committee to input in September, probably not much later than that, because we'd probably then be looking for the consultation to go. I mean, we wouldn't consult in August anyway, so yeah.
Thank you. I could see nods. Nobody. Councillor Bagent, will you put your hand up or agreeing?
Yeah, just a brief point. When the finance officer says high-level approach, approval from Cabinet, does he mean the details of the high-level approach, or the fact that we're going to have a high-level approach?
So we need to have a public consultation. That's a statutory requirement on the budget. The sort of questions I'm going to be asking of Cabinet for July, and bear in mind I haven't had these conversations with Cabinet yet, but the sort of questions I'll be asking for Cabinet's direction is in terms of how detailed we want that consultation to be. We've taken different approaches in previous years, so if you look back over the last few years' consultations, last year we asked some very specific granular questions about individual budget proposals. That's one approach. If you go back to previous years, we've maybe taken a more high-level approach, asking the public how they would prioritise various services. So there's different ways different questions you can ask, different ways you can ask the question, and that's where I'm kind of going to be seeking Cabinet steer in July, and then we will obviously go away and do the more detailed design work to bring back.
Councillor Bagent, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, once Cabinet have given the steer, wouldn't we want to have some input on that? Isn't that our purpose? Before the finance officer gets his teeth into it?
So I think that's the proposal, is to bring it back to September to this scrutiny committee before it goes out. Obviously, it would then go back to the Cabinet member for approval, but I think the idea of this scrutiny committee for pre-scrutiny is that we're collaborative, we try and put in our ideas early. So I think that's what I'm proposing, or that we'll pick up later when we come to the forward plan agenda.
Not to miss the point, Chair. Are we talking about coming in September after the decision's been made, or before the decision's been made?
So the original decision to the general high-level stuff will be in July, and we don't have another committee before then. Obviously, though, any member is free to scrutinise the Cabinet papers and obviously address the Cabinet member from any group if they've got concerns. So my proposal is our only opportunity to scrutinise it is September. So I think, again, in future years, we're going to have to get used to running on a slightly longer timescale for these things, but we are where we are now. So I think, and obviously by next year, we will have the performance management reports and all these things that will be helping us make informed decisions. So my suggestion, well, the only suggestion we can do is have it to September now. There is no point previous to that, other than obviously Chair and Vice Chair will be keeping a close eye on things with the other scrutiny committee chairs, who I should have said earlier, we are meeting with monthly to make sure we don't duplicate work and that we are coordinating what we do. So I'll let Lucky Matt put that on the forward plan for later. When we've got an idea of what we want, we'll then go through it in a little bit more detail just to make sure we're not having too massive an agenda. Thank you. Does anyone else have any particular questions on timescale that they want to ask? Otherwise, I'll move back to Councillor Davey if you wanted to ask on a different point.
It was going back to James' comments, which I think were related to bringing together the dashboard, and really welcome what you're doing. I think you mentioned having a workshop. I would like to see the template before we have the workshop rather than have a blank piece of paper. I think I don't want us to sit in a room with a deciding, and I think that would be much more helpful if we had it that way round. And then it's not so much a workshop, it's then adapting what we might be having. Does that make sense? Okay, that's great.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's absolutely the plan.
That's great, but I really welcome that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I have to say I agree. That sounds like a very sensible way forward, because if you put us all in a room with a blank piece of paper, we might be there for some time. I'm guessing that no one else has disagreed with that proposal, so that's Okay, has anyone else got any questions on Jane's items, I should say, and anything with Jodie as well? Councillor Bennett.
Another very basic question. Is it going to be the same dashboard for internal and external use?
There'll be that the staff, operational managers, will have quite a different dashboard because they'll be looking at very operational measures. The intention for the one that is coming to Cabinet is that is a very public, that is a public document. So, and I think in the paper back in March, I reflected on that not all data is helpful. You know, it's about, is this meaningful, relevant? Is it easy to understand? Is it robust? And that if you ask those questions of data that officers might need or be able to use, and data that's most useful for you here, they're not going to be exactly the same now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. It sounds very, very promising. I also particularly keen to see that integration of performance data, you know, and actually what we're doing alongside the money. Are we building this around any sort of existing custom and practice that other councils are using elsewhere? Are we, you know, real pioneers in this field? And I guess linked to that is the software we're looking at, which I guess will be quite integral. Is this something that's well established, or is this something that's being sort of developed, you know, by us, for us?
There's lots in there. Essentially mixed. The approach of performance management and kind of integrated performance management isn't new. I think it's new to us, but I think it's the right way for us to go, particularly, and I think in relation to the fact that this is the single biggest savings we've made in a year, and being able to track both the money and the performance is a really critical thing, so that we know where we are and what we're doing. In terms of the software, and I'm quite happy to have a conversation outside of the meeting on this as well, we are using a relatively new programme, but it's been very well tested. We've been working quite closely with South Cambridge District Council, who are also using it, something called Smart Sheets. It's very, it's not an expensive way of doing this. It's like, it's like Excel with bells and auditable elements to it. So it's really flexible, it's really easy to put data in and out of, it's really easy to connect into other systems. It's not a big legacy system that we are building and paying a lot for. So we've had to reflect very carefully on, you know, things that are coming down the track. We don't know where we'll be in 3 years' time with LGR. We don't want to, and I don't think it's wise at this point to invest in a big kind of legacy type system. So we're using a different approach, and if anyone does want to ask more about that, I'm quite happy to talk and potentially also invite the officer who's most experienced and knowledgeable, which is not me.
As a very quick follow-up on that, I guess one of the things that would be useful when we're maybe doing the consultation in September, for me it would be really helpful to see if there is good practice out there from other councils that we can harness and take a little bit of, well, like copy basically, if it's something good.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else? Oh, apologies, Councillor Gawthrope, go ahead.
I hope it's not too early to ask this, but are you finding that there's a lot of information or some information you have collected that in the past that you don't need? And I'm looking forward to the workshops. For me, of course, and this is me, that I of course would like to see the operational not spreadsheets, what's the word I'm looking for, dashboard, because that would help us perhaps think what we do and don't want on what we would use for a deep dive or for monitoring, for scrutiny.
I think we do need to be more careful with the operational data, because that is designed for officers and it won't necessarily, I mean, if I go back to the really simple things, that data needs to be robust, and but it needs to be meaningful and relevant. And if some of the data that's going to be relevant and meaningful to officers is not, particularly specialist, is not going to be that helpful. And I think, you know, Jodie can reflect on the kind of financial data that some of you may be able to interpret. It for many needs more careful presentation to make sense. What I don't want to do is flood everyone with a lot of data that then becomes difficult to see the wood from the trees. I think, you know, for those of you who have that extra level of expertise, we can certainly explore how you can look at what we're doing and how you might then bring that into a deep dive. If that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any more questions on this item? It's really good to hear everyone's views. I say we're getting into the way of how scrutiny works, so it's still a bit of a learning curve, but I'm really pleased we've got a couple of things hopefully penciled in our forward plan, and thank you very much to Jane and Jodie for their reports. So we're going to note these two updates, and we actually move on to Jane again. Oh.
The whistle stop of the corporate hub over the next 12 months. So
I beg your pardon, you did ask me that. Yes, do go ahead.
obviously, developing the performance management framework is a key priority, and that's alongside the work that Jodie's been talking around the budget, because they're the kind of vital planks for the corporate hub, because we set ourselves a purpose of enabling an effective, efficient and high-performing council. These are two of the really key things that we need to get right to support that. We've got some other priorities that I'd just like to flag. You might want to think about them or not, but just so that you know that we're doing them. So we are, obviously, as a corporate hub, we have HR, we've got the people function. So there's the supporting the embedding of the structural changes that have just taken place. That includes the rollout of the kind of action plan from the people and culture strategy that came here previously. And the rollout in particular of the Lead Cambridge programme, which is focused on building the capacity of council managers. That's out for procurement at the moment. We're doing interviewing next week on potential providers. We're working on the development of a communications and engagement strategy. You know, we refreshed and reworked the communications and engagement team, so that is another key piece of work that's in train. We're embedding the legislative changes brought in by the Procurement Act. Now that's quite technical stuff, but procurement is basically how we spend our money, so it's really important we get that right. And we're embedding the project management office within the new People and Change team, which is led by Lindsay Fulcher. And that's the key underpinning to the performance management framework, is having a project management office in place. We're also working alongside the renewed 3CICT team, and that'll come up in the next item. And obviously, as the picture around a local government reorganisation starts to emerge, I am expecting that the corporate hub will be providing support beyond the small team that's already in place. So yeah, that's really quick, because I know we've had quite a lot of your time already.
No, thank you very much. That's very helpful. So I suppose open to members, particularly noting the things that Jane has flagged. This might be where we want to ask questions about when would be good to post or pre-scrutinise these things. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, Councillor Davey.
You mentioned procurement, Jane. I think it might be interesting to particularly bear in mind the council's desire to operate on a community wealth building basis, how procurement will operate, particularly in a view whereby we might be in a situation on occasion whereby local, i.e. our own community, bids may be more expensive than more regional bids. And I think it might be quite interesting to see how that pans out, both in terms of how the principle works against the financial implications. So I'd be fascinated to hear more, but whether that's appropriate for this committee, I don't know, because it might be something. I'm just conscious of the work timetable could become enormous very quickly.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jane.
I think procurement would be a really interesting. I'd love to see procurement come through for something for you to have a look at, because it's not necessarily something that always gets the limelight. But we've got a very active team. They've been doing a lot of work, in fact, on social value, so that might be something you want to explore.
Thank you. I mean, certainly procurement has been slightly on my radar as well. So I suppose, well, I'll come to Councillor Bennett first.
I also had a question on procurement because I understand there has been some chatter about possibly changing the rules nationally to allow councils to do more community wealth building in Mike's phrase or just buying local in mine, and looking at some of the barriers to SMEs to participating in procurement. So if that is likely to come through, how can we ensure that we coordinate our work with it? Or should we just assume that we have no way of knowing if and when it's going to come through?
It's already a principle of council.
So that...
No.
Let's have the microphones on when we're speaking, if that's all right. I was actually going to ask something very similar because I agree. I think procurement is something probably that sits very clearly for this committee. But I'm aware the Procurement Act is quite recent. Is it February? So I suppose my question, picking up on Councillor Davey and Councillor Bennett, is when would be sensible to look at this? Because obviously if we haven't started doing it yet, would it be helpful to have some pre-scrutiny, or is this something maybe we need to bed in for a few months?
I did have a conversation with our Chief Procurement Officer. I mean, no earlier than the autumn, but you probably don't. I mean, I think it's on your work plan. There's no particular time where we would not be able to come and tell you where we are. So you might want to have more that, you might want to think about, is this something you want to explore over more than one session? Is it? I think there are options for you, and both myself and Jane Whiteman-Turl, who's our lead for procurement, would be happy to have a discussion about how that could work.
Oh, Councillor.
Yeah, I think the challenge in this, I guess, as we're kind of building the plan on takeoff with this, the new structure, is understanding where we'll add value. And I get there's a slight question if it's a really good, well-functioning team. We might not actually, as a team, add that much, but I guess we'll get assurance that is the case. I guess, would some of this fall under the internal audit processes, which I think is still Jonathan, isn't it? And would that fall under civic affairs and that side, which may then feed into this committee?
No, well, does it fall under in everything in a way? All of the financial activity does, but this is scrutinising, for example, how have we done with the new Procurement Act, and what are we doing? To the question that's been raised about, and the language I would use is social value, because that's what it's called. I think is a very, very valid thing for this committee. It's a resource that we're using. It's how we are spending much of our money is spent through the procurement route. So your understanding of how that works, I think, is could be beneficial.
Councillor David?
The conversation off record that Naomi and I were having, and apologies, was about the community wealth building, social value. Going local is already a principle of this authority and has been for a number of years. Therefore, how it works against what might be national requirements is also intriguing. And I think it would, I'm not sure it is audit. I think this is actually about political imperative. And I think it'd be quite interesting to see how that operates as against value. I think that's the sort of line I was coming from. But again, I do appreciate this. It's about, I suppose, at the end of the afternoon, it's about what the actual amount, how much we can actually do during the course of a scrutiny year.
Would it be appropriate to suggest that we had an update for potentially, we've obviously got to look at this forward plan, an update in September, and I think it would be particularly interesting, the update, particularly for those of us like myself who are not experts in procurement, to just know what isn't possible, i.e., for example, we may want to put out a tender for someone who charges more but has more social impact, and where the Procurement Act comes up against, as Councillor Davies said, those kind of political issues. Would that be, not necessarily for a deep dive, but just to set the scene for us in September? And then obviously we can have that debate then about where we want to go with it. And hopefully by then you might have some sort of an idea of the timescales, and you can talk to the procurement team about what's reasonable. And then we'd obviously pencil it in for maybe a later committee to look at in more detail. Would that be acceptable to members? I'm seeing people nod. Is that acceptable to Jane and Jodie? So it wouldn't necessarily need to be a deep dive at that point, but just something to set us out the parameters, how the Procurement Act has changed stuff and where you think there may be a potential issue that would need to come for a decision, for example, where we may not be, where there may be a conflict between the political desires of the council versus the Procurement Act, which obviously is about getting the best value in a very specific way. Would that be acceptable?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much. Matt, can I ask you to note that for September, and then obviously we'll put that down as a later one for a deeper dive. I noticed you mentioned the community and engagement strategy. Sorry, I'm assuming that is to residents and obviously other stakeholders. Is that something members are interested in? What's the kind of timescale on that, or is it coming to cabinet where we can see it and then perhaps? I don't know. So I'll be grateful for an answer on that.
The officer is developing that work at the moment, so that I'll have a time scale. I'm hoping within the next 3 to 4 weeks on when that's going to start going through the process.
Thank you. Would you be able to update Chair and Vice Chair, and then we can have a look, and obviously if there's something we can obviously email members and check, because I'm mindful we don't want to overload our agendas, but equally something like the communication strategy will tie in, I think, well with a lot of the things like the budget consultation and all those other things coming forward, where we're always trying to make our consultations as diverse and representative as possible. So are members happy if Vice Chair and I take that forward with Jane over the summer? Yeah, nobody is objecting. Does anyone else have any more questions for Jane on this particular area before we move on to the next item? So, poor Jane, I'm sorry about that. You've got item after item. I can't see any more questions. Okay, thank you very much. Again, we'll note this because it is an officer report, but Matt and I will take forward those issues for the forward plan. So we now move on to the next item, which is Jane again on the Shared Services Partnership.
Thank you. Now, this is an item that will be going to Cabinet in July. So just a very brief background. The shared service agreement exists between the City Council, South Cambridgeshire District Council and Huntingdonshire District Council. It sets out the basis for sharing specific services, and in particular the three that we share are building control, legal services and 3C ICT. The agreement's been in place since 2015, it was renewed in 2020, and the recommendation that will be going to Cabinet in July this year is to renew the agreement for a further 5 years. This is very much a continuation of business as usual. The substantial decision to continue with 3C ICT as part of this agreement was taken by the Executive Council last September. In fact, it was the 30th of September at the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Committee then, because we needed to. It was the one area with the one service where we wanted to actually take a proper deep dive. So we've been working towards this renewal for 18 months to make sure we had time to look at and bring forward for decision the area that had been of concern. That decision came through here last September. The very strong recommendation is that the services, otherwise it's a continuation of as is. They are working. There is no reason to disrupt them by not continuing with this agreement. What I would add is in relation to the impact of local government reorganisation. See, the proposal is to go for a 5-year renewal to give some certainty, but the officer recommendation across all 3 councils is even with LGR we can progress safely to renew the agreement. There is a clear exit clause. It does rely on a mutual agreement, but the expectation is that we are moving towards some kind of mutual agreement, even if it's one not of our own making, on what local government reorganisation will look like. And by renewing, we take off, it minimises the risk of additional change for these 3 services. So I'm happy to take any questions on this one, in particular in relation to 3C ICT, where we did do a much deeper dive and a very significant refresh. On that note, it might well be worth just reflecting that since that meeting, we have a new Chief Digital and Information Officer, Simon Oliver, was appointed. He's been in post, really, and I think Tim was part of the interview panel for him. He's been in post and has put in an action plan that is progressing on time and with pace. It is an area, again, that you might want to have a bit of a deeper dive into, but probably a little bit later on, possibly early into the new year, so that he's had 12 months to work on his action plan. So,
Thank you very much, Jane. That's very helpful. Again, we brought this one because obviously in an ideal world we could have pre-scrutinised, but it's coming to Cabinet before our next meeting. So that's why I asked Jane to bring the update today, because I thought Scrutiny Committee members might wish to ask some questions. So does anyone have anything they want to ask? Councillor Davis.
If nobody else speaks, I will. And forgive me, I'd like to do a deep dive on 3CICT. The question is when. I think it's not been the greatest thing we've been able to deliver over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. I think it's been lost in the shared services, even though we put in millions of pounds into this particular area of work. I'm delighted to hear of the changes that Jane's been able to instigate. And the question for me is, when do we do the deep dive, not if? And it's when it will be, as hitting on Jamie's point earlier, it's when it can be helpful. Because I'd hate us to have a deep dive after something's been done that we don't then like. And so I think it's a really important area of work. It's a significant financial implication for the council. So for me, the question is when, if I'm honest, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Bajan?
Thank you. Jane, you mentioned 5-year contract. Potentially in 5 years we won't exist. Where does that contract go if we get broken down and moved into another group?
so
Will we as a city be liable to pay for the whole 5 years is the question.
no, I think I could. There is an exit plan within it. There are always risks, but we can't do without these services. They're not a shared service agreement is different to a contract because it operates under different legislation. So it's about the 3 councils working together and saying we're going to work together because it's beneficial in some way. So there is a very clear exit plan. I could just be very upfront and say that Simon Oliver, who's really excellent, has already been looking at, and Tim will have some awareness, if we needed to disaggregate, how do we do that in a way that's easy to manage? So if you do a deep dive with him, I think what you will be finding out is where he's thinking is all about, not just how do I do it well now, but what's that going to need to look like, and the context of LGR is there for him. So there are always risks with any kind of thing, but I don't. It's just going to be one part of the bigger picture that will develop around local government reorganisation. But there is an exit plan in the shared services agreement.
Thank you, Jane. So picking up on Councillor Davies' point, I think the timing is interesting. I haven't asked you this in advance. You've already done a deep dive on it to the ICTs. Is that something you would be able to share, albeit potentially confidentially, with this scrutiny committee, so we could actually see? Because I'm thinking, I take Councillor Davies' point, if we do it too soon, we might not add value, but if we do it too late, we'll have missed the boat. So is that potentially something you might be willing to share? I appreciate it may not be a public document and we may have to do that in closed session, but would that be a way, I'm looking at Councillor Davies as well, really, would that be a way forward? Or, because I think that would at least inform us as to where the red flag issues might have been, or do you have again, I'm very open to offers on this. I'm aware that there's been issues with 3CITT. I think it came up at one of the committees I was on last year. So, yeah, I'd be grateful for members' views on this, really, please.
I'm glad Jane's reassured, but I think I want to be reassured. And I think members need to be reassured. And I think that's the issue here. And so it's how Jane is able to present to us so that we can have that reassurance. Because, and this has nothing to do with Jane, it's just that we've heard officers talk about 3CICT before. and I think it's about time we had a good look.
It's certainly, Jane, is there a possibility of this committee seeing the deep dive we've already done as a starter point? And do you have any views on when would be useful to scrutinise this?
So that did go to Strategy and Resources in September 2024. So if you remember, it was a confidential paper because it had information relating to staff. So that has come, and I think it did have quite a detailed conversation at the time. I think the most useful person for you to have would be Simon Oliver, who is the Chief Digital and Information Officer. What I could do from today is have a conversation with him tomorrow and feed back about when is a good point. I'm hearing sooner rather than later, but I think there is something about, he's got a very clear work plan. Is there a point where there's going to be something to bring that would be to do?
Thank you. I mean, could I ask for Democratic Services, really, if we can just reshare those pink papers, because I'm mindful that at least one councillor wasn't here last year, Councillor Dale, and various others may not have seen it. I think I would have got, that's where I did see it. I knew it come to some committee, but yeah, are members happy for Jane to talk to the chair and vice chair about this quite soon and then come back to committee via email about how to, I mean, do we want to pencil it in for September, I suppose, is what we're saying. That's our next meeting. I'm looking at Councillor David again. So.
Sorry, I'm wary. I don't want to dominate. I'd be happy to be steered by yourselves. I think the other question I'd raise is, when is it going to the Hunts Council and when is it going to South Cambs? Because they clearly must be interested as well, because they're also putting in a lot of money. So there must be some process of member approval that we could fit into appropriately, I would have thought.
Very good.
So the paper around 3CICT went to all three councils back in September last year to go ahead and move to the model with a Chief Digital Information Officer, which was really, and I think, Tim, what you were involved, was about making that shift from it just being more about the plumbing, as I call it, and more into providing really strategic advice on how we use digital better in the council. So that did go through all three councils. The shared service agreement renewal is going through all three councils at the moment. We'll talk to Simon about tomorrow is that process for scrutiny in all three councils, because that hasn't actually come up from the other two. I'm aware of where it's coming through in terms of the decision on the shared service agreement, but I can find that out.
Thank you. Matt is just noting that, yeah, he's going to take that forward, that Jane will liaise with myself and Councillor Gawthorpe Wood as the chair and vice chair. We may well then come back out and check with members. In effect, it's going to Cabinet for a decision on something that's already been agreed at Strategy and Resources, is what you're saying. The issue is where we can add the most value to then make sure it actually works. I think most people who've been in committee room 2 are aware we do have some issues with IT at times. So I think, yeah. And the idea generally of a strategic overview sounds very sensible. But I do think, as Councillor Davis said, this is a big financial commitment and it's critical. Everything we do is reliant on the IT now. The live streaming, papers, the lot. If it doesn't work, never mind for officers who are trying to work on it as well. Obviously, it's their day-to-day. So, okay, that's great. I will put that on the work plan. And if Councillor Gawthorpe Wood and I need to discuss it with you, we will email. Otherwise, we'll potentially schedule it in for September, unless there's a reason that shouldn't be the case. Thank you. Has anyone got any more questions on either 3CITC or any of the other areas of this agreement? Again, the papers will be coming to Cabinet in July, so we should be checking those anyway. Apologies, Councillor Bennett.
I was just asking, particularly with the white paper update we had last week, whether sort of the council is looking at any more shared service arrangements in the run-up to LGR.
Not that I'm aware of.
That's a nice, short and sweet answer. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've finished with that item, though we'll probably revisit it later under floor plan. So our next item is an update on the stock condition survey, and I believe we have Ben Binns online, and and James Elms as well. Beg your pardon, James, are you happy to give us a report, please?
Absolutely, thanks ever so much, Chair. So this item will be going to Cabinet in July, by which time it will have a set of fully developed papers. The council manages somewhere around 7,600 homes. To ensure these properties are safe, decent and legally compliant, we need a reliable and current stock condition database. This is a requirement of the Social Housing Regulation Act of 2023. Currently, we have a backlog of homes needing to be surveyed. This pushes them over the required 5-year cycle. That gap makes it difficult to plan investment effectively, identify emerging issues like damp, condensation and mould, poor energy efficiency and demonstrate compliance with the regulator's social housing expectations. That is key for that is obviously the decent home standard. Additionally, there's around 270 newly built homes that still need to be fully integrated into our asset management system. These challenges are built up over time through a combination of systems migration issues, internal surveying capacities and some other operational pressures. We now need a model that gives us both immediate assurance and a sustainable way forward. So how will our surveys be commissioned? We will be proposing an externalised phased delivery approach. Phase 1 will be a reinforced programme of resource to clear the current backlog. Phase 2 will be embedding a rolling programme from year 2 onwards, surveying around 1,500 homes per year on a 5-year cycle to ensure full compliance. This approach will allow us to accelerate full compliance while embedding a longer term solution that's both scalable and cost effective. Just for members' note, when the paper comes through, there will be, I think we've got about 4 or 5 other options in there. So we're not driving you down one decision here, but there will be a preferred option here. Our procurement strategy, the surveys will be commissioned through a compliant procurement process if that's the way that we decide to go, designed to ensure value for money, quality and delivery assurance. Specifically, we're likely to be using either existing frameworks or a competitive tender, depending on market conditions and capacity. Contracts will be awarded based on clear criteria, cost, quality, social value and capability to deliver at pace. Performance will be monitored through contractual KPIs, audit sampling and tenant experience measures. Internal oversight will be maintained throughout with a structured mobilisation, onboarding and data integration process. We'll also be engaging with the market early where needed to test assumptions and provide to ensure provider readiness. This strategy balances urgency with control. It gives us capacity to deliver quickly while maintaining accountability for cost data and tenant impact. Happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, James. Just to let you know, obviously this is not a massive budget item, but because this is our first meeting and I'm mindful that several members have already mentioned repairs and damp and mould that might be coming up as a potential task and finish group, I really welcome James coming today. Obviously we won't be able to do formal pre-scrutiny, but I understand James is happy to take views on what kind of things they may be looking for when they do go out for procurement on this, because obviously it's a stock condition survey, so this I felt would tie in quite well with some of the things that may come up. So I think James has kindly said if people have ideas, he can feed it in slightly more informally than the normal pre-scrutiny route, but I felt that was better than not having it here at all. So I'd be grateful for any views. Councillor Shield.
Please, can you tell us more about the tenant experience measures that are being envisaged? Thank you.
Yes, so they will be what the supplier, how they engage with the tenant on site. Have they turned up on time? Have they been pleasant? Have they been cordial? Have they informed the tenant about what they're going to do? So that's the actual visit tenant experience part. The part beforehand is obviously the booking, making sure that that's been done in a pleasant fashion, I suppose, and making sure that there's enough forewarning. So it's about making the whole process amenable for tenants. One of the bonuses about operating potentially on an externalised model will be that we can potentially do stock condition surveys on the weekend and later into the evening, which obviously is a pressure for colleagues at the moment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shield, do you want to come back?
Thank you very much. And also, will there be a way of having the big picture in terms of satisfaction across the city?
Yeah, so that will most likely fall into tenant satisfaction measures, but we'll be able to present KPIs back to committee at any time once the process is up and running.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Griffin was next.
Thank you. Thanks, James. I would like to know how the survey results feed into our maintenance and repair organizations. I mean, is there a pipeline there that in the process?
So we create a whole lot of stock condition data that then feeds into the asset management plan, decent home standard, and indeed any kind of emergency or needed responsive repairs. Does that answer your question?
I think so, but I mean, if you encounter serious problems, does that get resolved immediately?
Yeah, of course. So if we've got anything that what we call an HRSS, which is a dangerous situation in the property, then we would expect the supplier or whoever's doing the stock condition survey to notify the responsive repair team so we can sort that problem out in the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else? Councillor Bennett?
Hi. Really pleased that you're doing this, James. We've had a bit of problem in Abbey. I don't know whether it's also echoed throughout the city with people who have decided that the council's not doing repairs for one reason or the other and have been doing their own thing, which might be good in some ways, but it's definitely not good in others. And also with hoarding and mental health and people not sort of permitting access to their homes. One of the things that we've been doing is that we've been offering, Elliot and I have been offering chaperone services. You know, sort of we literally hold the tenant's hand when somebody comes to visit, and that has been quite effective in getting access. And we're very happy to continue to do that, though obviously, you know, we can cope with, say, 1 or 2 requests a week, but not sort of 6 or 7 a day. But I just wanted to say the offer is there for the survivors of domestic violence and for people who are a bit wobbly mental health. You know, if they are prepared to have us there, we are prepared to do it, and we also have some volunteers locally who are prepared to do that sort of thing associated with the church groups.
Thanks ever so much, Naomi. You know, that will be welcome. Access can be a problem at times, so any support that we can get for that would be gratefully received.
Councillor Dale, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so on that access point, I think over the years when I've sort of looked at this, it's often come up as a kind of key item for why we're not able to, you know, get the level of data that we'd like. I guess that is an area that probably for this committee, I think would be very, very good to focus on. I think there may be tangible outcomes we could look to deliver. I guess linking to that, you mentioned around potential procurement on these services. I'd be interested to know, how we're focused on that, and also actually, I guess if there's any external data on how we compare with other councils in that regard, because I appreciate that 100% is probably going to be impossible, but it would be interesting for us to know how we compare with others.
Yeah. So we're around 20% occasionally for non-access there, and I think you're right to mention that it's not peculiar to Cambridge, and that's around about where everybody else is. I think that a coordinated effort about non-access once isn't an excuse for us to not go back for 5 years. So we need to make sure that we keep going back to try and get access. But like I said, 20% or there or thereabouts isn't peculiar to Cambridge.
Thank you very much. If I might add as well, I think refusals have been an issue that's come up at Housing Committee over several years, and I think some of the previous contractors, it was very much sort of knock twice, put it down as a refusal, whereas they were just at work. So I'd certainly be very keen to see, if you're going out to commission these kind of stock surveys, that we have quite a robust way of knowing who's refused versus who just wasn't in. And I think you mentioned previously doing out of hours or weekends, because a lot of our council tenants obviously work and don't have the luxury of being able to work from home. So I would certainly welcome something very clear that it isn't just a matter of knocking twice or dropping a letter off and saying they weren't in when you came round. We need to be clear that that's not a refusal. That's just someone not being in when we've knocked on their door. And I think, just to sum up, it came up, support for residents, obviously, whether that's through ward councils or obviously housing officers, and access, really, because it would be nice to get above that 20% of not being able to access for decent homes. And I suppose the other thing which might, again, tie in with the damp and mould is, I think Councillor Griffin raised, it's that idea that if an officer is in there doing a stock condition survey, can we merge some other functions to make sure other stuff is going right? Because I think in terms of our assets and also our budget, that would be sensible. So I don't know, James, if that is something that could be put into that kind of thinking of when you're going for procurement, that it might be something where we could add things on in future or work with other providers, because obviously we're going into service the gas boilers and things like that, but there are opportunities, I think Councillor Griffin said, where you go in and perhaps find something else, and it doesn't need to be an emergency, it could be something else, but it will just save another call later and some more officer resource. So I don't know if that's possible.
So we need to be really clear that the people that go in to do the surveys are surveyors, and the people that go in to do the repairs that we've just talked about are repairers operatives. So they're two completely different skill sets. So if I'm going in to do a survey, that's what I'm going to do. I may note that there's some problems and raise those with the repairs team. It's then for the repairs team to do it. So coordinating it, while it sounds great in theory, delivering it in real time is not quite the same.
No, thank you. I do appreciate. Oh, Councillor Gawthorpe would go ahead.
My understanding was that this was already happening, and that's from the Housing Scrutiny Committee, where other issues that residents had were being picked up by the repair team. How well this is done may be a different thing. And also, you know, during the housing audit that's been going on for the last few years. Thank you.
I think we're agreeing with each other here, actually, that is what happens at the moment, but it's not the same people that are doing it, and we're not entering the property at the same time as a surveyor.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was the point we're making. We want to be confident that this new contract still has that in it, so that if a surveyor goes in, obviously they're not going to repair it, but they'll say, hang on, there's something here I can just put on the system, upload it, rather than the resident having to ring us, send someone else out. But as you say, if that's already happening, I think, well, I'm guessing from the comments around here, we'd be keen for that to continue and certainly be quite a robust part of the contract. I'm seeing some nodding in the room. I appreciate you can't see them, James, but a few thumbs up. Does anyone else have any? Oh, sorry, James, go ahead.
So I was just going to say that we won't be the only people that are looking to do this externally. I think Greenwich and some other large councils do this because the system works when it's been externalised. Internalised models is where we've had struggles and where others have had struggles as well. So we won't be going to somebody who's just decided to start doing stock condition surveys. We'll be going to a supplier who is well regarded in the marketplace, if that's the approach that we choose to go down, or that you approach.
Thank you very much. And you said, sorry, when's that coming to Cabinet? Just remind me.
So this should be Cabinet in July.
Thank you very much. Again, I'd urge members to keep an eye out for that report. And again, if people have views, it's fine to come back to Councillor Gawthorpe Wood and myself and Matt with any comments. Anyone else got anything to raise on that, which I think we will pick up later under the potential task and finish group? No, thank you very much, James. Again, we will note this report because there's no vote on it because it is an officer report. So I'm mindful of the time and the fact we probably need a short break at some point. We have an update on housing performance to come. Are people happy to just carry on and do that, and then we'll take a short break before we move on to the forward plan bits? Is that okay with everybody? Fantastic. Okay, and now I think we've got Ben online for this. I can't quite see the Teams chat well enough to see who else is here. So Ben, is it just you tonight, or have we got Samantha as well?
We've also got Sam Shimmin as well, so I will be focusing on the development programme and doing a verbal update on that, and Sam Shimmin will be looking at other HRA aspects for that. So I think it's the first thing to just clarify to members. There will be a development update going to Cabinet every quarter. So the next one will be in July. So this is a verbal update. We are looking to have a slimmed down version, which will be a 2-page summary with appendices so that Cabinet can track the programme that's been approved and where we are with current programme and delivery stats and other data that might be of interest. So what I'm going to do today is just talk through some of the progress to date compared to the last committee, and I'll be happy to take some questions. But the first thing to state is that we've just handed over Aylesbury Close. That's 70 council homes. If you're in the area, it's well worth a look, and we are going to be celebrating our 1,000th home at the Aylesbury estate in the next few weeks. We've got another 54 homes at the Meadows that are due to be handed over in the summer, and we have started on site on 4 schemes: Fanshawe, which is 84 homes, 45 council homes; HES Merkets at 70 and 28, Newbury Farm, 150 homes, 60 council homes, and East Barnwell, which is 56 affordable homes plus community centre, library, and commercial units there as well. So a flurry of activity that's just started on site. Some of you may be aware of the hoarding that's gone around Stanton House, and we have submitted a planning application for demolition, which we hope will take place later this year. We've got approval for approximately 29 council homes on that site, and that's going through the design process. Next in the pipeline that's approved is Hanover and Princess and Eakin Road, and we are targeting planning submission towards the end of June. We've waited deliberately for the spring review just to understand what that impact might have. But we will also be briefing ward councillors as well before any planning submission. So work is just finalising on the designs for that. North Cambridge Framework for Change is still out for consultation. We've been meeting various different groups and people, commercial tenants and leaseholders and everyone across North Cambridge, and we've been getting some excellent feedback on some of the questions we've been asking about priorities for investment. East Road, we recently met with residents on site to explain the delay of that development. It's currently on hold as we look at viability, which was reported in the last committee, but we have met residents to explain, and they gave feedback on some of the concerns they had about the site being used as a depot, and that's been taken back with officers to look at getting a resolution to that, and we are going to go back to residents in September. We did mention in the last committee report about small sites, some of which have been approved in terms of committee approval and a budget, and we're currently reviewing that, and we will be discussing with members at ward level and portfolio level to discuss next steps on that. We have submitted a Homes England bid for Fanshawe in line with the previous committee reports, and that we hope will be successful. That's part of the increased funding that was announced a few months ago in the current programme. And of course, all eyes are on the spring review tomorrow, which we will report back in terms of what that might mean for the housing programme. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. And before we start, just to note, members, this is obviously the new build report that used to come quarterly to HSC, Housing Committee. I put it on the agenda today because, again, it's part of the update. One of the questions I will be asking later is, do we want this every quarter? Are we happy to just look at it when it goes to Cabinet? Councillor Shield.
Thank you, Ben. And this is a statement, not a question. It's just to say how impressed I've been by the work at Aylesbury Court. I'm really proud of what we've achieved there. Big thanks to you on that. I have had a walk around Catherine Belsey Court. It looks fantastic. And I should also just add that I have had 0 complaints from any of the surrounding residents in terms of the space management and access management while the work's been going on. So, yeah, 11 out of 10. Brilliant. Thank you. Big gold star. So I think I speak for everybody in the Arbury team. Thanks.
Well, that's very positive to hear, Councillor Shield. Councillor Griffin.
Thanks, Ben, and congratulations on progress on Fenshaw. I think that's been going very well. I would like to know what the status is of the Davy Road project.
Certainly, yes. So Davy Road is an approved project and design work is underway. There's no hoarding that's gone on, so it's really at the design stage, and we are expecting to progress that later this year. I think we're targeting a sort of autumn planning submission, but we will need to brief ward councillors probably in the next month or so, I think, to give you an update on that. And also the number of tenants and leaseholders who have recently moved out. Good progress has been made on that. We're pleased to report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bajan.
Ben, you mentioned Ekin Road's going to plan in July. Given the difficult living conditions in some of those flats, are tenants currently being decanted from there rather than... Sorry, Councillor Bennett wants to answer.
We'll let the officer answer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are the tenants being decanted at a great rate? Thank you.
We're really pleased with the levels of rehousing that have gone on, particularly with tenants, and we're over halfway in terms of the number of tenants that have been rehoused across the city, sometimes locally, wherever they have chosen to want to live. So we're really pleased with that progress. More work still needs to be done with some leaseholders. Some have already gone through the legal process and found a new property, which is good news. So more work to be done, but we're really pleased with progress. And my team, Andrew Johnson and Nikki, are working really hard with the tenants to reassure them and make sure that what they're fully aware of what their options are.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other questions for Ben, so thank you very much, Ben. That's much appreciated. Are you happy to hand over to Samantha, who I think is online as well?
Thank you.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Ben. Hold on.
Chair, I thought you raised a question about how we monitor things in the future.
I think we might pick that up under the forward plan. It was just sort of put a marker down because I'm aware that this is quite granular detail that might perhaps be better scrutinised through Cabinet unless there's a particular issue, but I'm open to members' views. But yeah, if that's okay, Councillor David, we'll pick that up at the end. Thank you. Samantha, are you there? And thank you very much, Ben.
Hello, Chair, thank you. Yes, I am here. So, firstly, I wanted to talk through a little bit about performance. So I don't have a detailed sort of verbal update in the same way as Ben has. But what I wanted to do is give you a bit of an overview of what we're doing around performance for our council homes, and then also talk about what's coming up over the next sort of weeks and months, so that you will have an opportunity to think about what you may want to come at a later date. So in terms of housing performance, we started sort of a new performance type report at Housing Scrutiny Committee in February, where we combined the compliance report that had been running for quite some time with sort of more wider data relating to the landlord service. And we are looking to continue that piece of work, adding in what members asked for at the time and tenant and leaseholder reps, and also some of the feedback we've had from other areas, which I'll go on to talk about in a moment. So we will be still pulling together a quarterly performance pack, and this will be taken to the new housing board when that goes ahead. So that will be viewed with our tenant and leaseholder representatives. Obviously, the terms of reference, I appreciate, have not been finalised for this board, but as I've stated, it will include our elected tenant and leaseholder reps. The quarterly pack will include sort of operational KPIs on all aspects of sort of housing management and repairs and maintenance, and potentially there will be a performance pack by development as well, but it will also include sort of annual items. So James mentioned earlier the tenant satisfaction measures. That is an annual return that we do to the housing regulator, and we obviously will pull out a report annually in relation to that, and potentially an action plan as well for areas that we may want to improve where we are. Those tenant satisfaction measures have a couple of aspects. So one is about tenant perception. So we go out and do an annual survey, but also sort of operational KPIs as well as part of that. So that's just to give you a bit of an overview of where we are in relation to sort of performance and where that might be seen at present. Going forward to kind of what's on the agenda over the weeks and months with housing. So very imminently at the moment, we are currently in our inspection process with the regulator of social housing. We have sent out a briefing to members, but it was just to reiterate, you know, this was announced in May. It's a very quick turnaround. It's an 8-week process effectively. It will happen every 3 years, so that this will sort of become a bit more business as usual. But for Cambridge City Council in the current regulatory regime, this is our first inspection against the regulator's consumer standards. We'll have 2 rounds of document submission as part of this process. We've already completed the first and we're currently in the second. So we got the details of that at the end of last week, and we have 2 weeks in which to submit. The regulator will then be on site towards the end of July. But what we won't do is we won't receive our rating as such. We will get a rating against the consumer standards between C1 and C4 until towards the end of October. So let's just give you a bit of an idea of the timelines, but we will receive that grading towards the end of October. Moving on to the next sort of area that is quite imminent, and that is the introduction of Awab's law. This is on the back of the tragic death of Arab Ishaq in relation to damp and mould in the property, and it's been included as part of the Social Housing Regulation Act, and it basically mandates that social landlords deal swiftly and remedy hazardous conditions, and particularly around damp and mould, but I'll expand on that in a bit. So the first part of this comes into force in October this year, and it will require social landlords to investigate reported hazards, including damp and mould, within 14 calendar days. Any emergency repairs on the back of that inspection must be initiated and completed within 24 hours. So there's some clear timescales there that we will need to meet. As part of this, the Ombudsman will be given greater authority to oversee landlord compliance with this. It will then go on to be expanded in 2026 to include more hazards, so more than damp and mould, and leading up to 2027, where effectively all of the hazards that identified in the Housing Health and Safety Rating, so HHSRS, except overcrowding, will come under the law. So that's just to give you the timeline of that introduction. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, because James has also provided me with some narrative around that, so I'll go on to that towards the end. Resident involvement strategy renewal. So we had commenced work to review our resident involvement strategy sort of over 23 and to 2023-24. This was paused as part of the council-wide transformation process, so it has meant our strategy is overdue for renewal. And the reason it was paused is because as part of that transformation work, we were looking at moving resident involvement closer to sort of the wider community engagement that the council does, which is exactly what's happened within the communities group. So resident involvement now sits within the same team as our other community development officers, because a lot of the work they do also involves tenants of our service. So it's about ensuring that we capture all of that work that we do as well. Now that move has taken place, we are developing a timeline for renewing that strategy, resuming making sure that that includes all of that wider engagement that the council does, that includes our tenants and leaseholders. We will obviously be involving our tenant leaseholder reps in that piece of work, but we will be looking to put that on the forward plan probably for sort of spring next year. And that will go to Cabinet for a decision, for adoption decision. The next thing I wanted to sort of just reiterate, so this has been an ongoing project for quite some time. We did regularly report to Housing Scrutiny Committee with updates, but it's the rent regulation project. This is obviously continuing. We have suffered some delays in refunding tenants, partly due to the DWP not having a mechanism for recalculating universal credit housing element for either previous financial years or for closed claims. We are still engaging with them quite heavily, but also we've been having to sort of work through the two systems that we use for housing and housing benefit in how they talk to each other, because that we will need to recalculate housing benefit for any tenants that have received that. Another piece of work as a result of that is we have got a draft rent and service charge policy. This will be put on the forward plan for September, but it will obviously go to the Housing Board for tenant and leaseholder input. It's a key action around the governance of rent setting for us to ensure that we don't make errors again in the future. And that policy will also go to outside counsel to ensure we have that third party assurance that it meets our legislative and regulatory requirements. Another policy that we have got, which is likely to go to, will be put on the forward plan for Cabinet, is our repairs and maintenance policy. This is a new policy that's been drafted in collaboration with our tenant and leaseholder representatives. It's also been through our new resident involvement group known as our armchair reviewers, who have signed up to sort of say they're happy to look over our policies and provide feedback, which they have done, and that's been taken on board. Again, we're looking for that to go to the Housing Board and, as I say, onto the forward plan for September Cabinet. We are looking to, or we are going to conduct a tenant census. So one of our data gaps that we are aware of is in relation to the information we hold on our tenants and their households. We have been ensuring that we collect sort of additional information at our tenancy audits, but we're not currently completing enough of these in terms of filling that gap quickly enough. So we need to put something else in place. We are expected to demonstrate by the regulator that we know our tenants and are able to offer perhaps tailored services or information in different ways to different groups based on protected characteristics. But until we hold sufficient data on our tenants, we're not necessarily able to identify what those groups are and what their needs may be. So the first step for us is to fill our data gaps. So we are looking to procure an external firm to conduct this survey for us, and we're looking for that survey to commence in September of this year. And in terms of some of the work that we're doing in our repairs and maintenance side of things, so we've already talked about policies and Arab's law, but part of the work that happened as part of the transformation programme was about setting up a delivery assurance team. The whole point behind that team is really driving delivery. They will support and coordinate the full programme of housing and property improvements over the next year, obviously many of which you will see coming to either this committee or cabinet. And they will look to provide focused delivery support, data and systems management, contract oversight and performance tracking. So what that means is that our frontline teams are able to stay focused on the residents, but we are still able to ensure consistent and accountable delivery. As part of obviously Awab's law being introduced, we have been strengthening our response to damp condensation and mould. We've been delivering a sort of more coordinated approach, and we have reviewed and updated the policy, and tenant and leaseholder reps have been involved in that process. Obviously, the key areas of focus for us is defining the timeframes and responsibilities, so that we can make sure we adhere to Awab's law, improving our case handling and oversight, training and awareness, and exploring additional delivery models. Having the delivery assurance team will just help us achieve a faster, more consistent approach and response to DCM, a clearer line of sight from report to resolution, and increased resident confidence that their concerns will be taken seriously and acted upon, which I think speaks to what Councillor Bennett has already sort of spoke about, what they're hearing from some residents in Abbey. And just stronger assurance that we're meeting our legal and regulatory responsibilities. This work is in development and forms part of the wider effort around improving the way we manage our property condition and respond to emerging risks across the housing stock. We're also reviewing the technology that supports our housing and property services, with a focus on the main system we use, which is called MRI. So we're just looking at how that's configured, how it's used, and supports us with ensuring compliance is there, tracked repairs, asset management and performance reporting, so that we reduce our reliance on spreadsheets, and also that the data is accurate, it's accessible, and we use that to make real-time decision making. We are also reviewing and strengthening our asset management functions. So part of that is in relation to the stock condition surveys will help inform part of that work, but just clarifying the purpose, roles and decision making across the service, aligning the asset management with compliance, finance and things like net zero carbon objectives. Hopefully that should help us better manage our budgets, supports our longer term investment that protects both the residents and the HRA, and just balances day-to-day needs with our longer term planning. And then last couple of things. So we are obviously always looking to review and strengthen our compliance function. We've done a huge amount of work around compliance over the last sort of 18 months, but we can't rest on our laurels and that needs to continue. So we're not just doing housing, we're looking at expanding that across the whole of our property portfolio as a council, but taking a similar approach to what we've done in housing, so building on that good base. Ensuring we've got live reporting, clear accountability, and just ensuring we've got that legal compliance across the full council estate.
Oh, sorry, Samantha, are you wrapping up now, or did I interrupt you?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, I appreciate that was a lot to go through.
No, that is really helpful, because I think this is an area that members have already indicated they have an interest in, which is why we wanted to bring it forward. Has anyone got any questions for Samantha at the moment? I mean, this will probably come up again in the forward plan when we talk about potential task and finish groups. But does anyone have any questions? Councillor Bennett?
I was just going to say that I've had various conversations with Samantha about the damp and mould over the last year and a bit. And one of the questions to me, if we were to have a damp and mould task and finish group, is what's already happening, which Sam has referred to, and
I
whether
think
we'd
that's
be
definitely going to come
duplicating
up under the final item, if that's okay.
and just getting in the way.
No, yeah, thank you. No, not at all. It's always good to hear from everyone. The question I had, Sam, so the results of the regulator that's currently doing the assessment, that will be available in July, you think, but obviously we won't get the rate. Sorry, when will the report be available? Because I think that will be useful information to have now. I know obviously we get a rating later, but when, because I think this committee will be interested in the nitty-gritty of what's in that report. And the other question I had, obviously you're going to do a load of performance data. Is that going to be completely different from the performance data that Jane is doing, or will it be coming in a similar format? Because obviously in terms of our performance and assets and scrutiny, it kind of would make sense for them to be on a similar system, but I don't know if that's possible, because I do appreciate the HRA is a very different beast. But if I could go back to Samantha first and then perhaps to Jane, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. So we won't actually get a report from the regulator. What we will get is a regulatory judgment. So what I can do is send requests to be sent with the minutes is a link to regulatory judgments that have been given to other social landlords to give you a bit of an idea of what we will receive. But it won't be a report, it will be a regulatory judgment. It will have our rating, and then it will explain why we've received that rating. So it's just to sort of clarify that, and that will be received all together towards the end of October. That will be published. So that's all we will receive. It will then be for us to take that away and review action plans we actually already have in relation to this, but also to, to look at, are they already covering anything that's been identified, or do we need to add more to those? And that action plan, again, we are looking to take to the Housing Board in July.
Oh, thank you. So that's, yeah, and I suppose that's my other question is, obviously we can't scrutinise anything at the Housing Board. The Housing Board has no scrutiny function under the Constitution. So again, I can see Councillor Holloway's here. We're very keen. I think I'm hopefully speaking for members that this committee is very involved in those terms of reference, because we don't want it being a full stop when it's gone to the Housing Board and then they route up to officers that avoid scrutiny, but actually, more importantly, hopefully has some useful input from us. So I'll just note that. And in terms of the performance management, I don't know whether Samantha or Jane would like to answer that. Sorry, Jane, putting you on the spot there.
No, we are going to be working towards an integrated report. Now, the data is coming from the housing team because they are the experts in the data. The whole thing will come as one integrated report.
Oh, excellent. So in effect, it will be similar codings. That's very good to hear. Does anyone else have any questions for Samantha? And obviously, when we look at the forward plan later, again, another thing to think about is when we get these kind of updates, or whether we leave that via a task and finish group. So I'm just noting that for Matt to bring up when we come to the last item on the agenda. Are there any other questions for Samantha? Councillor Dale?
I guess just an observation. Thank you for big, long, detailed report. A lot to take in. So I guess a question for us, because I think this is an area of interest for all of us, is how we maybe break down some of these challenges in a way that we can then monitor going forward, and the framework for that. And I think probably linking back to a question I had earlier around the census data you mentioned and the sort of lack of information we've got. I guess I'd be very interested to know how, again, we compare with others, because there's a bit of me that thinks, oh no, we're not meeting our regulatory requirements, but are we sort of facing the same issues and the same challenges, or are we behind? And I guess I don't know if that might not be something you can answer now, but it'd be always useful to kind of, when we've got a gap, to know how that compares with others in doing the same role in this country.
So I'm happy to respond to that. So I think similar to what James inferred before, I think against our local authority colleagues, we are probably comparable around sort of data. I think there was a big push when the Data Protection Act came in. People became very nervous about what data they held. If they weren't necessarily doing anything with it at the time, they perhaps went through a process of deleting it and stopping collecting it. Now we know we have a purpose for needing it. We've now got to go back and start filling those gaps again. That wasn't just us, that was also housing associations were in similar positions. I think they've perhaps thrown a bit more money at some of this than perhaps we have. They have different funding mechanisms that they can bring in. So we need to be mindful of that. And they tend to have a lot bigger resources than we do in terms of officers. But I think there will be some local authorities that are ahead of us. There will be some that will be behind us in this sense. So, we do benchmark through Housemark on our housing performance. And that is, again, that's something that we will bring as part of that sort of quarterly performance pack to Housing Board. As you say, I appreciate that Housing Board isn't a scrutiny function, as you say, but our tenant and leaseholder reps do need to sort of see this information as well. So that's why, potentially things may go to both, depending on what you call in, but it would still be appropriate for our tenant and leaseholders to be involved in a lot of these reports and processes.
Thank you, Samantha. Yeah, in fact, I think, I apologise, I know you're in another meeting, Eddie, but at the start we were saying that was our main concern, was that the tenant voice doesn't sort of get lost at Housing Board and then not come where we could make use of it. So I think we're singing from the same hymn sheet there. Councillor Davey.
It's picking up Jamie's point, and it's one for Jane really. Can we benchmark against other authorities in the performance in not just this, the lot? Because therefore, our figures may be great, they may be awful, but unless we benchmark, we don't know. And therefore, it'd be really helpful if that could be as a principle, some sort of benchmarking against our family of authorities.
Where there is comparable data. Now the challenge with some of like Housemark is really helpful because it's almost sort of laid down and that's the data that gets collected. Some of our services people are collected, you end up comparing apples and pears, but we will be doing everything we can to have good comparable data. That's the only thing I would flag just to be aware of. Where we've got the easiest place to do that is the statutory data because it's always collected in the same way in every authority.
I just think as a principle it would be helpful to have for the reasons that Jamie's already outlined.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the new scrutiny function we have here, those kind of data points for any of our service areas for both committees will be really important. I think it's a really good point, Councillor Davey. So anything we can do, I appreciate they're not always identical, but for us to know what we need to scrutinise, it would be really useful to know how we're performing against the sector. Does anyone else have any more questions? I don't think so. Again, we're going to note this report because there's not a vote on it. I'm proposing we have a short break. Obviously, I'm mindful we have a guillotine at 3 hours. So are people happy with 10 minutes or do they want a little bit longer if people need to get some food if they've come from work? 10 minutes is fine. Okay, well, let's give us 11 minutes. We'll come back at 7:35, please. Thank you. Can we take the live stream off, please, Dan? Welcome back to the next part of our Scrutiny Committee this evening, and we're moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the overview of scrutiny, which is going to be introduced by Matt, our representative from Democratic Services, who's just going to give us a brief overview of how we're going to handle the forward plan and or the work plan, which is the final item on the agenda tonight. Thank you. I'll hand over to Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for having me. I won't speak to the report in detail because you have it there in writing, and it's lengthy enough, I think, already. The one thing I probably just would pull out from the report is at paragraphs 4.8 onwards, the forward plan is explained, and at 4.10, the work programme of this committee is explained. They are different documents. The forward plan is a document that essentially belongs to Cabinet and will list all of the key and non-key decisions that are going to go to Cabinet for decision. This committee will see the forward plan because that's a constitutional requirement and because some of what goes to Cabinet may be of interest to this committee, but there may be things that are of interest to this committee that are not going to Cabinet. And so the forward plan is not the only place that you can go to pick out business for your agendas here. You will have a much broader work programme that will include things that can come from all kinds of different places. So just to be clear, that I might at times accidentally use the terms interchangeably, but they are different documents. In terms of this committee, and I suppose a tiny bit about my background, I work quite often in different local authorities, and in recent years I've had more of a focus on scrutiny, and so it's been really, I think, been really helpful to be here and to work with many of you already on this. Just to talk briefly about, I suppose, the principles of local authority overview and scrutiny. The role of overview and scrutiny is a powerful one in local authorities. It's there in an executive system by law. So you have legal rights as scrutineers to challenge the executive, to hold them to account, and to challenge, I suppose, the council more broadly on its business. And that is exactly who you work for. You work for the council, meaning the full council. And in so doing, you should have what you consider to be, as scrutineers, the best interests of Cambridge City at heart. You do not work for the Cabinet. Your job is there to, I suppose, hold Cabinet's feet to the fire, and also to be that critical and constructive friend to Cabinet. And the approach that the Chair and Vice Chair have been taking in meetings with me and with others, and very much in the lead up to this meeting, is about having a collaborative approach. I would almost say cross-party approach, but actually the approach we're pushing here is more about almost sort of non-party approach. As you well know, this committee is not whipped, should not be whipped. You do represent different political groups, but when you come into this chamber for scrutiny meetings, you should be thinking about the city, the council more broadly. And there will be times that you support what the administration is doing, there will be times that you don't, and that's quite appropriate. Finally, I suppose I would just point out that this is going to feel more like a cultural shift, because there is still a right to pre-scrutiny in this system, but there's a little more of an emphasis on post-scrutiny now. You have an opportunity as the scrutiny, or one of the two overview and scrutiny committees, to, I suppose, check whether things have gone the way that they should have gone on decisions that have been taken by the council, by Cabinet, by other committees of the council. And I think that something that's going to be a really helpful tool for you in that, not to put pressure onto Jane, but is the performance management changes that Jane has been talking about. We talked a bit tonight about taking updates at future meetings. There might come a point where such updates are kind of redundant, because you'll have the performance data and the KPIs and the budgetary information at the tips of your fingers, so that within an instant you can decide whether or not there's something that scrutiny needs to be looking at. And clearly, if something's going really well, you probably want to look at it and say, is this something we can replicate elsewhere in the council? And if something seems to be going really badly, you can pull in officers, executive members, departments, and ask what's going wrong and what's the plan to fix this particular issue. I did say that was a final point. I think my final point, this will be my final point, is something I've said to, I think, probably all of you in training sessions. I've said it to the Chair and Vice Chair a lot, and I've said it to others, which is that it's very tempting and very easy to build up a huge work programme of things that you want to look at through the year. What you probably need to get comfortable with is really picking your battles. I think the more that you can focus in on the really key things that you want to scrutinise, the more effect you will have, the more impact you will have. If you try and cover 25 different things in the year, you probably won't feel at the end of the year like you've had much of an impact on any of them, because there's only so much time and resource that people have. So I'll just end by saying that I'm, of course, Chair, very happy to take questions from you now. Everyone also has my contact details. Any questions that occur to you, middle of the night ones, ping me an email. I'm more than happy to talk about them. And I'm always happy to get into local authority governance and scrutiny. And when the time comes that my contract ends, you've got a fantastic democratic services team here who will be able to support you going forward as well. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for your support in getting this set up. Quite a new thing in a new system. Does anyone have any questions for Matt on process? Not about the forward plan as in items, but anything on the process? Councillor Bennett.
I had a question on the methodologies you shared with us about how to select which things you do your deep dives into. And the Newport one I thought was particularly interesting, but I tried it on a couple of things that I had in mind. And one of the things is that almost everything's scored as being important, urgent, whatever. So I think we need a scoring matrix rather than a flowchart to select. If we're going to use any of those techniques, because we have to distinguish between what's important and what's more important. So that's just my feedback from my pre-reading.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Matt, do you have any comments on that? Is that something often used, or?
I think this might have been, that specifically might have been covered by Aisha in her presentation, I suspect. I'm going to give you a very woolly answer, which is that there is no right way of doing it. If you as a committee think that in good time having some kind of scoring matrix would be helpful to you to determine business, then by all means officers can help you produce that. My advice to you would be, given that you are in slightly new governance system, new scrutiny committees, this is your first meeting, is probably get the lay of the land for the first 6 months or so. You do have a constitutional review built into the agreement of the new the new constitution. That review was agreed at Civic Affairs Committee a month or so ago and was then agreed at Council. So that might be the kind of thing that gets earmarked for that constitutional review. And at that point, you as members will get a feel for whether or not the agendas are looking like you think they ought to be looking. What I would say is that within the report, and it's a little earlier than the section I just mentioned, but there is a whole list I have put in there of ways in which an item can get onto your work programmes and consequently your agendas. And I think a really key part of that initially is going to be conversations in these meetings and then the conversations that officers will have with the two chairs and vice chairs of the two overview and scrutiny committees. And they're very keen to ensure that all OSC members' views are taken into account in setting the work plan, setting the agendas. So I would suggest that probably the first port of call is if you think something isn't getting the attention it ought to do at these meetings, raise it with the chair, vice chair. If then in time you think that a scoring matrix is useful, then we can certainly look at that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. I mean, I tend to agree. I think at the moment, I feel that we're feeling our way, and obviously as are the Cabinet, because this is a new system for Cabinet papers. So I think I'd be happy to wait a little bit. I absolutely take your point, it would be really useful, but I'm just not sure at the moment that that would be helpful because I'm not sure what we're scoring on yet. I suppose, is that all of the questions for Matt? Okay, we'll move into the main bit of this item, which is setting our forward plan and work plan. I think one of the things we're all going to have to be conscious of with our political hats on as group members is managing group expectations. You know, this committee has got limited time, and whilst it is great to have small questions about things, quite a lot of those will probably be better addressed at Cabinet, for example. So if you have a particular worry about a certain area of damp or whatever, that's something to take to the Cabinet member, or something about the performance management in one smaller area. So Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood and myself will be trying to manage this agenda so we're not there till the full 3.5 hours plus break. So your help would be much appreciated with our respective political groups to just try and explain that it's a slightly different system from the committees where you could take a lot of things. And I think that will be an issue with public questions as well, about how we manage where they go and who answers them, because obviously I can't answer a public question addressed to the ruling group, I'm not in them. So it will be a bit of a learning curve, but we're very committed to working very closely with Councillor Young and Councillor Gardner-Smith, who are chairing the other scrutiny, to try and make sure that this works. Would it help? I'm going to run through what I think we already covered, whether we agreed dates or not. And I know Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood has got her eye on it, and Matt. And then, if that's all right, I'll move to questions and proposals from the floor. We did. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Bajan.
Oh, did you want to say something first, Councillor Bajan? Go ahead.
I probably should have thought this a bit earlier, but local government reform and housing development company, are these things that will be a standing report on this committee, or will these things that we will be expected to go to Cabinet to talk about?
That is literally what we're going to discuss now. It's open to us to decide. So for a body that isn't the council, so I, as chair, have the power to insist that a cabinet member comes to defend a decision or to explain what they're planning to do. I or nobody else, we cannot force other bodies, so the mayoral authority, the Cambridge Growth Company, but we can invite. So we might be able to invite someone to come, or we might ask them to send a senior officer. So again, that is very much what this forward plan is about. So the forward plan tends to belong to cabinet, so that will be city council things. The work plan is a broader thing. That's where we can, for example, say, okay, we'd like to look at the Cambridge Growth Company when this happens or that happens. Obviously, as members of this scrutiny, I would hope that you're all going out and keeping an eye out for things coming up that you think will be useful. You know, obviously we have links like Councillor Anna Smith to some of the bodies external to the council. So, but holding that thought for a moment, I'm just going to run through what I think we've tentatively... Oh yeah, could you turn your microphone off, Councillor Bajan?
I can.
Thank you. So at the moment, the things I have slated for September was potentially our feedback on the proposed public consultation on the budget. I don't think that would necessarily be a deep dive. I would envisage that being some kind of officer report. Looking at Jodie there, who is nodding. Thank you. Another possible one is the Shared Services 3C ICT. Whether that is September or later, I don't know. I'm happy to take views, but I have already agreed with the Chair and Vice Chair and Jane that we will meet with the 3C ICT person who's overseeing it so that we can kind of get a feel for what's going on, and happy to report back. But I mean, are people happy for that to be put on the agenda for September? I think that, I don't know whose cabinet portfolio that sits under, so I was going to have to, I think it's the leader. Sorry? Oh, Councillor Simon Smith, I beg your pardon, it's not the leader. Sorry, Councillor Holloway. So again, that would be a meeting we could invite Councillor Simon Smith to attend, to talk about it, and potentially the officer from 3C ICT. Again, we can ask them to attend. I think if you're happy, Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood and I will take that away with officers and have a discussion with Jane and come back with some proposals, because it will depend, obviously, if they feel strongly that that timescale is not appropriate, we may need to review it. But is that, can I sense agreement for that and the public consultation for September? Excellent. The next thing I had was the budget, the performance management, possibly combined with the budget, for November, because that's the last point we really have a chance to scrutinise. I mean, it's not to say we can't bring it back in future. And I suppose I'd put a question mark again about HRA, because obviously previously we've always scrutinised those separately from the general fund. I will take views from committee, whether you want to put the HRA on. I mean, I'm mindful that a lot of the issues around potentially a task and finish group might be around the HRA, the housing revenue account, sorry, which is the budget for council houses, for those listening. Can I ask for views from members on, and officers indeed? Is that Jodie?
Sorry, Chair, could I just ask some clarification? You mentioned the budget coming in November. The budget would normally come to this committee in January, once the proposals are worked up.
Oh, I beg your pardon. So for the consultation, would that be September or November then?
So consultation would be September. We'd then go out, consult with the public, and come back to you in January with the proposals.
Okay, apologies. So budget for January, we're saying, the full budget. And do we want to have the HRA as a separate agenda item or merge it in? I'm mindful it's a sort of a new process from last year, and obviously they are quite separate and there are different issues. So I don't know. To me, it seems sensible to take them as two separate items, but I'm open to disagreement. Or Jodie.
It's your discretion clearly, but all I would say is that when the budget comes through to Cabinet and full council, it will be one paper covering both general fund and HRA.
Okay, so we'll call it in as one item potentially, but Jane?
Yeah, sorry, we've been looking at, in the break, looking at the timeline now. Your meeting in November is on the 4th. It's going to be very hard to have the financial information for the Q2, because obviously that's just 4 weeks from the end of the quarter to get those papers published. So that's something we're going to have to explore how we deal with that, because it's a technical timing issue.
Thank you. Matt was just to remind you as well, we can also highlight what we want to scrutinise in the budgets, particularly. So we'll bring that together in January, you're saying. So the performance management, Jane, was that November then? Did I get that confused?
That's the problem that I'm raising, is that your meeting is on the 4th of November, so we'd have to publish before we've probably got the financial information, because the Q2 quarter will finish at the end of September. Then that doesn't give us long enough to get all. I mean, it's a matter of So we need to have a look at timings.
Yeah, and Matt just wanted to add something.
Thank you, Chair. And I think these probably some of the details of these things we can iron out in those meetings with chairs and vice chairs. I think in the timing of things like the performance management, it might be appropriate to say that you've had an update from Jane in this meeting today. She's committed that she's going to send an option or two out on almost the sort of the draft of what that performance management will look like to you. Has then talked about having a kind of final shaping workshop, I suppose, in the autumn. And then that will give Jane and her team time to go away and finalise what the performance management system looks like. And then it might be something that Scrutiny wants to look at X months hence to scrutinise whether or not it's fit for purpose, whether or not it's doing the job that obviously officers wanted to do. So it may not be that there's a specific scrutiny aim you have in November, because by that point it's probably more or less designed and going to be implemented.
Does that sound a fair summary, Jane?
Yes, however, you might. It's for you. Certainly, from my point of view, that works. The information will be going to Cabinet in November, so you will all have it. But it's just whether there was anything you wanted to look at, because your scrutiny timeline doesn't currently fit.
I think this is definitely one of the teething things we're going to be looking at in the review, because we've got a lot of issues like this where we want to bring it in, but we don't want to give officers huge amounts of work, but equally, otherwise we miss our slot. So, Councillor Bennett?
I was going to say that it's normally more helpful to review performance management systems once they've been going for a bit. And that could maybe, if members felt, that could even be maybe next July.
That seems...
Councillor Gawthrope-Wood.
I'm just trying to think when our meetings are. Do we really want to wait till July? So we've got one in March, January, and November, of course. Yeah, we've got. So I'm suggesting January or March, but not leave it till July.
Yeah, I think what might be useful, and again this can be discussed between chair and vice chair, would perhaps be an update in November when you've had the workshops with councillors, and just to let us know how it's going, let us have a look at the initial. Again, if we think it's not useful because we've covered it all on the workshops and there was no disagreement, then possibly not. But could we perhaps put that as an update, a bit like we're doing tonight? Would that satisfy members? But I agree. I suspect the January meeting will be pretty full of budgets. So obviously if it's ready in January, great, but we may need to be realistic, and this might be one where we work programme potentially towards March, if that's, and then again, that's before the end of the civic year. So, Councillor Bajan.
Thanks. I'm aware that the process of governing the council continues, and that our pools of scrutiny, as we rearrange ourselves, may allow things to go through that we would want it to have scrutinised. Now, if we don't coincide with what the officers are able to do, and I accept totally that they can't get it ready for the 4th, shouldn't we just move our committee meeting?
We can do an extra committee meeting.
No, not an extra one.
Oh, I mean, we can do that.
Just move it to
I would need to ask my constitutional experts. I have no problem with potentially moving a meeting to later in November, as long as we're not clashing against Cabinet or the other Scrutiny Committee. Is that possible? Are you happy to leave that with myself and the Vice Chair?
Take it away after.
Yeah, we'll take it away and see what's possible, because I'm mindful we've got to not clash with all the other meetings that are going on. But yeah, I'm very happy with that, because it's a frustration at the moment for all of us. I think that this is not sinking in the same way, because we've not, well, you know, nobody's had time to sort of sink all the reports in. So the other thing I had down was procurement. I don't think we reached a decision on what we do with that. Quarterly housing reports, in the sense that they always came to housing scrutiny for an update. My personal feeling is we probably don't need the sort of new build update to be scrutinised as such, because it is what it is. You know, and if there's individual issues around, you know, gas safety or whatever, potentially that could come to Cabinet. Unless there's obviously something that members see, because again, anything you see that worries you, you can ask myself and Councillor Gawthorpe to add to agendas. But then we also have the issues that Samantha covered, which are sort of the more tenant end. It's interesting because some of that sits with the other Scrutiny Committee. It is unclear at the moment where. I mean, it will be a decision for myself and Councillor Young and our Vice Chairs. Do people have a view on whether you wish to have a sort of it would be a written report in future from Samantha's team every meeting? Not at all. I'm minded not to cram the agenda too full, but equally, Councillor Davey.
I'm struggling to understand if that's the role of a scrutiny committee or cabinet. I'm not saying the monitoring shouldn't take place. I'm just not sure. I'm not convinced if I understand it right. I suppose I'm looking to Matt really for a steer. It doesn't feel like us spending time monitoring.
I do tend to agree with you, but I didn't wish to repress the committee if they wish to. But I think my feeling is, as and when urgent issues come up, that can come onto the agenda through the routes Matt talked about. But I think I probably agree with you.
My understanding of how, and I could be wrong, so please, and I often am, surely we should look at the reports, but then ask to see particular issues that we then scrutinise, rather than review the reports for an hour and then decide, that's lovely, thank you, bye-bye. That seems to be the old system rather than the new system.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll speak on the principles of putting things on an agenda rather than a specific item, which is that the items that you've provisionally penciled in already, I think you've got a clear aim for why you want to scrutinise those things. So just to give you a flavour, you've talked about performance management coming because it's going to be a really useful system to you. It gives you a cross-cutting view of the council. You want to see it be designed well, implemented well, work well. You talked about the budget, and I think kind of the obvious thing there is it's a huge amount of money that the council is going to be spending. So you want to make sure, and you as well are the finance overview and scrutiny committee. So if you're not looking at the budget, you're probably failing it, a kind of key part of what you do. And finally, you talked a bit about the shared IT service, because there's been some dissatisfaction with that. So there's a clear negative you want to remedy. So I suppose the question I would put to members is, when you're talking about things coming onto your work programme, is what's the scrutiny outcome you're pursuing? And if you can't think of one, and it feels like you're going to take an item just for the sake of taking an item, then maybe don't take the item. It doesn't preclude you, if you don't have a standing item or a regular update, from taking an item later on in the year, if an issue does arise.
Thank you, Matt. I think that is my feeling as chair, but obviously I'm aware that, you know, I wanted to hear your views first. And also, as members of scrutiny, we are meant to be scrutinising these things. When they come to Cabinet, we need to be looking at them. And if you've got a concern, come to myself, come to Councillor Gawthorpe Wood, and then there are provisions, as Matt said, for putting things on the agenda as and when. Councillor Bennett.
Hi, I'd just like to make a point that the things we've already discussed are all going to be things which will be drivers for success from a local government reorganisation, and some in particular IT systems are already mentioned in the Grant Thornton report. Performance management is key because reorganisations tend to throw up information about performance issues at the last minute. So if you have that information in advance, you are better prepared. So I would actually think of almost everything we've picked out so far as being part of our local government reorganisation homework, and with an overriding goal of having a less unsuccessful reorganisation that minimises the cost impact and the deterioration of local services. I also would like to just say one more thing, which is I think the January meeting, we shouldn't really put anything else in the budget on. I'm sure there'll be late any other business, but I think if we're going to be looking at both the HRA budget and the general budget together, 3 hours could easily be burnt up on that alone. But that's just my view. You may have others.
I think I agree. I mean, that's my feeling. The budget has to take priority, I think, in the HRA, because that is the biggest thing we do really on the council. If that isn't working, nothing else is working. For procurement, just to go back to that, I think, just checking with Matt, who's kept much better notes than me, that we were going to put that on the agenda for September for an update from officers, so Jane and her team, just to give us an idea of what's happened with the new procurement framework, where the potential issues may clash against the council's values versus the best value principles. And then we can take a decision in December. So are members happy with that as a proposal for September? So not a deep dive, but really an update so we can get our head around what we want to deep dive into. Is that okay? That's great. So we're not going to take quarterly housing update. We're not going to take housing repairs, but obviously come back if you need to add something to the agenda. The other issue I have is other stuff that isn't under the council. So you've got the mayoral authority, you've got Peter Freeman and the Cambridge growth, and we've got local government reorganisation, all of which I think broadly sit under our portfolio. So I'm open to comments on how, if and what we want to do with those. I mean, my view is we should be looking, I think local government review at the moment is probably a little early because we don't know what we're going to be proposing, but Councillor Davey.
You want me to, on each one, I think of those three, the one that I think should come here is the growth company. And the reason for that is that when they start to make decisions, we need to scrutinise what they do and the impact they have upon the city generally, but also the impact on the housing. LGR, I'm not sure, if I'm honest. If that's going to be taken through Cabinet, all we're going to be asked to look at or scrutinise is the decision of Cabinet, i.e. which authorities are we going to write? Now, if that's being dealt with in Cabinet, where I do think LGR becomes important is once the decision has been made, is that what the council will look like in the future. And that requires an awful lot of pre-scrutiny, because the last thing I would be asking for is that we should do something that is a standard council. We're going to look at what we're doing innovatively and how adult social care fits in and all that sort of stuff. So that's a real role, but I think that comes down the line. And the CPCA, again, isn't it about, not dissimilar oddly enough to housing, it's if there are decisions being made, we need to choose which ones we then scrutinise their impact upon the city. But I'm less... I don't know about that one. The other two, I'm probably have more.
If a local government review, in terms of the timescale, realistic, I think you're right. It's ultimately it's a council decision, isn't it? If we dissolve ourselves and merge with someone else or others. Timescale-wise, should we put something on, for example, for March, given that by then we would probably, and I'm keen because hopefully we'll be a well-working committee this year. I think it would be nice to pick it up. Shall we put that on the agenda for March? But obviously we'll review as and when things are on time or delayed. And for the growth company is the other issue. And again, time frame and what you want to do would be great. I think Councillor Bajan had his hand up.
Well, I think with both topics, we need to be really aware that our role here is to represent, as was said a little bit earlier, to represent the residents of Cambridge and not to represent the Cabinet's view. And so therefore I think that both these topics should be on the agenda for every meeting that we have. I think that we can leave it and then it'll go past and decisions will be made. And then we will be scrutinising a done deal. And that isn't what our role is.
What is it you want to scrutinise? It's back to the question that was made before. I get it with the growth company, and there's things we do have to scrutinise, and I think we should invite not Peter Freeman, but Cameron, who's the person who's accountable for this council, but Peter Freeman as well. But with the LGR, presumably we will have full debates at council, cabinet, and all we're deciding at LGR at this stage is who we go with, not what the council will look like. And so I'm not quite sure how we would scrutinise the who we would go with bit beyond what's already being done at cabinet.
And I think I'm very happy to take that away, because I do think, it's going to have to be a council decision, which there are some council decisions we can't scrutinise, but once it's been agreed we're doing X, Y or Z, then obviously there are the cost implications, the procurement implications, the budget implications, the HRA. So I'm very happy if things change massively and it's all agreed by July, then obviously we can bring it forward earlier. But at the moment, I think I concur with Councillor David that I'm not sure what we'd be scrutinising at this point, and that might be better to have those questions, for example, at Cabinet, where, as you say, all of us, because this affects all of us, irrespective of, anyone can challenge Cabinet members, whether they're the ruling group or not. It's not to put it off, but I'm struggling to see how it cuts across. But I will very happy to go away with Matt and Vice Chair, and we will go through and see, in terms of the Constitution, what sits under this committee. But again, I'm not sure what we can add at this precise moment, certainly not at the moment, and probably not in September either, because I don't think it's going to be officially decided on until a little bit later, if I remember rightly. Yes, of course, Councillor Bajan.
Chair, it's exactly because you don't know that it should come here. Well, if we don't know what's going to be happening, we should have it as a standing position on the agenda. If nothing's happening, then it doesn't come up. But if something does come up and we've said, we're going to put it off till March, then we won't see it. And whilst I appreciate that your role is of guidance with the Vice Chair, you keep saying, we'll take it away and look at it. Now, maybe right now we're all a bit treading water, but I'm not sure that that's how this committee should be working.
I think technically in the Constitution it is my call what goes on this agenda. I am obviously open to suggestions.
I think it would be helpful, Dave, for me, if I understood what it was you were asking us to scrutinise. I get the growth company, not a problem, but I can't work out with LGR what it is you're actually asking us to scrutinise.
And I think just to add, from my point of view, and I hope my Vice Chair as well, we are very open to members making suggestions. If something comes up for LGR, local government reorganisation, that suddenly requires some kind of scrutiny, I'm more than happy to consider putting it on the agenda. So I think I'm going slightly opposite from what you're saying, is have it as a standing item and delete it. I'm saying the opposite. Put it on, slate it for March, and if something comes up more quickly that is within the remit and that isn't with Councillor Holloway and Cabinet, or indeed full council, which I think most of these decisions will be, then I'm happy to put things on. And if you wish to talk to Chair and Vice Chair, we're happy to do that. I mean, ultimately, it's the Chair's call what goes on the agenda. I think I'm right in saying that under the Constitution, but I am trying to do my best to share that power around. But I do take your point, though. As you know, the thing we're missing today is more of the planning and transport area, and I will be meeting with Stephen Kelly very soon, once we've had the spending review through, because I want to get my head around what's coming for that, because I think a lot of all of these things interact, so that's slightly more on the growth company end. But with the growth, so I know Councillor Bajan isn't totally happy with that. Is everybody else on board with the idea of March, but plus bringing it forward if members wish to find something that can be scrutinised? LGR. Yeah. Councillor Bennett.
Hi, I just don't want to put words into your mouth, Dave, but is part of the issue that you want to see what the proposal is and why it is that proposal before it goes out to public consultation in the summer and before the official letter is submitted in the autumn?
What is it you want?
My point is because we don't know what's going to happen. We're dealing with a government that could change the situation slightly. We're dealing with a negotiation. We're dealing with a negotiation between council leaders that we don't know how that will run. They could come to a concord next week and then they could move forward with it and we'd be behind the 8 ball. I'm suggesting that it's on there for the committee and that we remove it. But I'm not in entirely comfortable with what I'm being told by the chair either.
I think the advice I'm hopefully getting is that it will be a council decision. It will go to cabinet, but it will need to be voted on in full council. I can see Councillor Day. I'm hoping Councillor Holloway is going to nod as well. He's sitting there. If Councillor Holloway is willing to speak, you are more than welcome. I didn't want to put you on the spot. If I invite you, it is allowed. Could you just introduce yourself, obviously, when you speak, because you haven't got a name badge up. But yeah, I'm very happy to take views on this, but my understanding is it doesn't sit in the scrutiny remit yet.
Hello. As has been said, at the moment there are discussions going on between leaders. There will be some public consultation very soon on some general principles relating to local government reorganisation. There will also be, as part of that, some discussion of potential geographies. But yes, ultimately we're talking about a full council decision. And just to talk about the process. So now we need to start working out business cases for submission by November the 28th. Those then go to MHCLG. There's then, as you've said, Chair, we won't actually know what the outcome is until March. So I think that's a sensible approach that you've suggested, because that is probably where the Scrutiny Committee could start to really inform some of the, because that's where it gets hard, basically. That's where actually there's going to be a lot more work to do in terms of the preparation, and it's right that the Scrutiny Committee should be involved in that. But yeah, I endorse what you've said so far.
Thank you. So just to be clear, the big initial public consultation is coming very soon, i.e. before our meeting in September, so there would be no point calling in the consultation. This is, as I've said before, the slight frustration of us setting this up and this committee being so early in the cycle is that there are things that are going to go to cabinet, but we can still post-scrutinise if we're not happy. I want to have some things, but yeah, so in effect, the only decision, so the main decision about public consultation will be in July. We already have some data on that from last year, I think, don't we, where we looked at unitaries. But yeah, do correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Holloway. Councillor Holloway is the leader of the council, and this is under his portfolio, local government reorganisation. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Yeah, that survey is not going to go to cabinet. That's just coming out. That's coming out in probably on the 16th of June. But there's not a decision about that survey. That's public engagement. But we don't bring every bit of public engagement to cabinet. We didn't do that for the previous public engagement we did about the future of local government.
Oh, okay, thank you. So it's not even coming to cabinet. So yeah, that's
no.
Yeah. Councillor Dale.
I guess just to hopefully provide, well, I'd like to understand the process for this committee more, and it might provide assurance to other members. When it comes to setting the agenda for the next meeting, that will sit with the Chair and Vice Chair. When is the deadline for you to do that? Because obviously we need to give officers time to prepare documentation. But if there are emerging issues, this committee would hopefully be able to react to them, which I think is what Councillor Bagent would be sort of referring to. Can you sort of lay out a sort of timeline for us for what you expect, at least at the moment?
I mean, ultimately, we have to set the agenda at least 5 working days before the meeting, though my intention is that this is in effect what we're doing now. We know what we're expecting to come. There is provision for emergency meetings. There is also provision for sharing emails between members to say, what do we think about this? Do we want to put it on? So if something comes forward for any issue, whether it's local government or anything else, then as long as you let us know, or the sooner the better, really. I mean, the forward plan is always published 28 days in advance, so we should know for most city council related things at least a month in advance. Obviously, it won't have the details of the report. That is, again, one of the issues I think we're going to have to bottom out this year, because we get the forward plan, but it doesn't have a huge amount of detail. So this is why we're being quite proactive this time with officers, getting them here to tell us what they think is coming forward. So as soon as you know, let us know. But we do also have quite a clear mandate that we do not want to be filling the agenda so full that some of the really key stuff, like, for example, the budget, as Councillor Bennett referenced, you know, if we had 7 other items on the agenda that night, that probably wouldn't be the best use of scrutiny time. And again, if there's problems about something that's going to Cabinet, any councillor can take that to Cabinet and spokes for, you know, opposition groups and things like that. So my proposal for local government would be then to keep a watching brief, have it slated for March. If something comes, and I rely on Councillor Holloway as well, who's been very open to communicating with this committee, that if something comes up that you think residents will be affected by, I would very much hope you will flag that to Chair and Vice Chair anyway. So I can see you're nodding, so I'm taking that as a yes. So I'm sorry I can't do more for that at the moment, Councillor Bajan, but if something comes up, let me know. And Councillor Dale.
Yeah, so to confirm then, it means we're not making any binding decisions here. We're providing officers with a steer on areas that we will look to focus on, which means that they've got more time to prepare. But that may be subject to change. You know, if there was something that was, you know, long trailed, but actually we decided there was another priority, then that could happen. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, apologies. I can't see Dan. He's sitting up on the stage running things brilliantly for us. Thank you, Dan. Go ahead.
No, I think what's quite key to explain to members, sorry to come out on the screen, is that these meetings are an opportunity for you to review your work programme and the forward plan of the council. So you can get to put items on the agenda for your next couple of meetings. I think what's key to remember is that the Chair, Vice Chair review these with officers in between this meeting and the next meeting. And that's an opportunity as well if members of the committee see an item on the forward plan or know something that they might want to add for the next agenda. It's to email the Chair, Vice Chair, officers to say, look, this is an issue that's come up. We think it's really important for scrutiny to review that at its next meeting, and that can be reviewed with the Chair and Vice Chair. So you think, well, actually, that's might be more important than some of the other items that we talked about at our last meeting, so they can then come forward and gives officers the time to prepare reports for that meeting. So it's a moving beast, but you get this opportunity at all of your scrutiny committee meetings to review your work programme and the forward plan to make sure that you always get sight of it.
Yes, and I just to reiterate that, I mean, we are keeping a very close view, particularly on some of the planning and transport areas that we haven't been able to bring tonight because there just wasn't data available, and we're aware there's a gap until September. That will tie in with the growth company as well, actually. But also, as I said before, if members have individual concerns, take them to the the cabinet member now. You can take them to all of us as councillors. You can take them to the officers. You know, if you have a query about local government reorganisation, Councillor Holloway, but you're probably the person to email. You know, this scrutiny committee isn't instead of the other mechanisms that we've always had through the council, which is as a member of the council, whatever party, you can go to any officer and I can approach Jane and say, I want a briefing on this or that, and we will be provided with that, and that will give us another insight as to whether it's something we want to bring to committee. So if you are coming for something on the agenda, we probably hope that you might have done a little bit of digging yourself, or at least copied us in to sort of say, I just found this out, oh, it is a case, let me bring it forward. I'm mindful of the guillotine. We have about 15 minutes left, although I could extend it half an hour. No, it's scrutiny as well. Yeah, but I do get half an hour extra, but I'm mindful that most people came from work and probably want their dinner. So I will move on from, oh, Mike, apologies, come back.
I was going to move on to the growth company. Could we invite Cameron, Peter Freeman and Stephen Kelly to come to our November meeting?
I'm very happy with that. There may be some stuff for planning and transport that could come up in September. I'm thinking more the emerging local plan sort of area. But if you want to have a separate item.
To overlap.
Yeah.
And that's why I would suggest that Stephen, Peter and Cameron should come at the same time.
Okay.
And bear in mind, I think if I've got it right, September seems to be getting busy, but November's out quiet, and that gives us plenty of time to do a real proper review of what's going on there.
In terms of the growth company, this is the Cambridge Growth Company for people watching, which is looking at obviously developing Cambridge over the next few years, led by Peter Freeman. I believe at the moment they're kind of in the gathering evidence stage, so I assume that by November, I'll look at Councillor Holloway again, by November we would have some more information about that. But as you say, possibly not by September, I think. So November would seem sensible.
They have commissioned some work to be done by a consultant, and they're not due to report on that till January, but they will, of course, be gathering evidence in the meantime. There will also be advisory council meetings in the meantime. So, yes, I would have thought there would be more for you to look at by then.
I think why I'm suggesting, thank you, Cameron, why I'm suggesting Stephen comes for that is the overlap with the local plan, and the two need to fit together, and that's why for that to come jointly to scrutiny would give us the opportunity to raise questions about both and how they interrelate.
Absolutely, and I will be meeting up with Stephen Kelly quite soon because I'm aware the emerging local plan is now emerging after we're moving forward after the development consent order. I'm aware we've got quite a lot to fit in the just about 18 months till it has to go to government. So obviously if there's anything urgent, I may decide to bring that in September as well. But as you said, I think hopefully November might be sensible, and I will ask Matt to extend an invite to Peter Freeman. If Peter Freeman can't attend, would members like to ask someone else from the growth company to come? I mean, I think he's been very open to attending things, but obviously I'm not, I don't know what his diary's like, so.
I have got his PA's contact details, if that helps.
Oh, there we go. Well, yeah, I think Peter Freeman would be ideal.
I think
Councillor Davey looks like he's dying.
Yeah, sorry, I'll jump up there. If it's not Peter, I wouldn't invite anybody else from the team.
Okay, Councillor Holloway's nodding. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So we'll aim for Peter Freeman and see what we can do. And certainly Stephen Kelly and Councillor Holloway, whose portfolio is Councillor Day.
To move it on to a different item, but we're talking about sort of issues we'd like to think about going forward for scrutiny. We are obviously in a big period of change and transformation, and that's why some of this is a little bit more chaotic. Maybe it will be in the future. I guess at the moment we understand and appreciate that, but we do need to start to see the structures all setting into place, and that's not just this committee, this is more broadly. I've not been provided with a who does what sort of document yet. I think there's various sort of concerns around just getting the structure in place, and I get all the timings, but I guess one of the things that I would like to see moving forward, and we're talking sort of September time, is real progress on that. And something that if it's not happening, then we might want to think about how this committee starts to look at that structure, because I think it does fall under sort of...
if I may, I will, as far as I was aware, the who does what document is done and should have been out, so I will look up and find out why that has not come out to you.
Yes, thank you so much, because I have to say it's quite a challenge with an entirely new cabinet system and an entirely new structure with officers for all of us.
Effectively, the management of the transformation programme is something that I just, we might want to check in on.
Management of the transformation programme put it to note. So the last thing, if that's everything, unless in terms of the combined or the mayoral authority, I think flag if there's something you think needs calling in. I'm not aware of anything urgent at the moment. We have a rep. Councillor Anna Smith is our representative on the board, so I'm not proposing to put that on the agenda yet, but again, let's see what develops in the next, and again, if members have a concern, please tell us. Is there anything else for the agenda other than the task and finish group? No. Okay, so hopefully, before we reach our guillotine, we have the option of task and finish groups. 2 members, cross-party, have asked to look at damp mould, condensation and / repairs. My personal feeling is that because we've got the housing regulator in and we're going to get a report in October, and we're also waiting on the housing tenant customer survey, it is probably not the right time to start that group now, because I'm a little worried. Task and finish groups are meant to be quite short and sweet. I mean, we can do them for longer if we want, but the idea would be we'd have a sort of subcommittee, either, I think, probably chaired by myself or Councillor Gawthorpe Wood, and we can invite officers onto it. We can invite other members of the council. So, for example, someone particularly interested in housing, if we wanted. My feeling is to review this in September. Not that I don't want to have this, but I just think if we're going to get a load of really useful information from the regulator and the customer service feedback, which I think is coming to Cabinet in July, if I remember rightly, it might be a better time. And as Councillor Dale says, we are still setting up the parameters of all of this committee. and I wouldn't want to run ahead with a task and finish group that then doesn't actually finish the task, because we need to be very clear on the criteria, don't we, Matt, for what we are looking for, what outcomes are we looking for, what are we trying to review. And I personally feel that will be better informed by the regulator's report, but again, if members feel strongly, please let me know. Councillor Bennett.
I just wanted to make some general points on that particular choice group. The first thing is that we're all assuming that we would only be looking at social housing, and there is actually a case for looking at working with private landlords and housing associations on condensation, damp and mould. Most of my casework in Abbey is council housing, but I do enough housing association and private sector work to understand that there are very different barriers to the solutions. And although it may be the same problem, it's entirely different solutions. But I just wanted to say that it's something we could look at. I'm not saying we necessarily should look at it, because obviously if it's our own housing, there's more a chance that we will be listened to, and anything we advise will happen. So you've got a greater chance of success. But we do have more residents in private housing. We have more residents probably who have a damp problem in private housing than we have in council housing. So I'm not saying we should immediately set up a task and finish group into that, but I think it's something we should think about and maybe come back for discussion at a later meeting. I know there's various initiatives that people have got at local and ward level about this, and I'm probably not informed about all of them. But I do think there's an issue about scope. So that's one argument for possibly looking at a different condensation, damp and mould problem. The other thing I want to mention is specifically about social housing, is we're still getting new cases, and almost every new case we get, there's a bingo card we could complete. They're almost all over retirement age. They're not confident using the internet or a smartphone. Often they've got other severe problems like a disability or mental health, or are bordering on destitution. These are all people who's got so many things to deal with that they can't focus on any one problem, and they are very hard to access. And the other thing I will mention is that reports about condensation, damp and mould cluster, if you get a big rainfall, you get a lot all at once. So anything we can do to get those reports in and know where the problems are before we get into the Ahab's law regime, where we have the stricter time limits, is probably going to save us a big headache.
Thank you, Councillor. Just before we move to other people to comment, firstly, housing associations are not in our remit of scrutiny. We can invite them to learn from what we're doing. We can invite them to sit on the group task and finish. We can invite them to come and talk to us. We cannot force them. My personal feeling, given this is the first task and finish group, certainly for our committee, is the focus is going to need to be on council homes, because that's what we've got the data for. I have absolutely no problem sharing our learning outcomes, but I think, I'd note your comments, but I think that's probably when we come to the task and finish group. I would suggest September or even November, we talk through at that point, but we don't have a constitutional right to scrutinise housing associations, other than obviously our environmental health remit, which is a slightly different thing. I think Councillor Davey or Councillor Dale, I apologise, I didn't see who was first. Councillor Dale.
Well, it's probably linked to the point, but I just think if we've got these reports coming, I agree with the point that, yeah, we may as well let all that work keep going. The officers have got enough people to answer to right now. If we then have a report, it sounds to me like the parameters of the task and finish group might be easily set by that report, because if there are things that are currently found to be wanting, then the group would want to basically work out how we address those problems and get them fixed. So I'm hopeful in the timings that in many ways the statutory regulatory reporting will help drive the next step in this for this committee.
That's very much my feeling. We are going to hit about 30 seconds. We're going to have to either close or have a motion to continue. I think we had Councillor Davey. Did you have a a comment.
My point was that Sam Shimon mentioned that they were going to have action plans. The task and finish group should work with the people who are putting together the action plans, which will be after the regulator's report. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. So are members happy that we defer the task and finish group and we review in September? Possibly just to confirm that that's still what we want to do. Now, we are just reaching our guillotine. Does anyone have anything else they wish to add? Or any other business? Otherwise, I will just, I think we started about 2 minutes late, so we're just down our 3 hours. I missed that. And in that case, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's a very steep learning curve. And I hope we're making good progress. And we will be keeping in touch. And please keep in touch with us, because we want to know what officers and members want to see. Thank you so much. And if I could ask Dan,